Hello, and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, January 23rd. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 5 of the ceasefire after 471 days of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll speak with Dyab Abu Jahjah, the co-founder of the Hind Rajab Foundation, an organization using offensive litigation to hold responsible those involved in atrocities of violence against Palestinians. We'll talk to him about the effort to pursue Israeli perpetrators of genocide and bring them to justice wherever they are. And later on in the program, Jon will cover the ceasefire developments and the resistance operations in the period leading up to it. We'll also be joined by Donya Abu Sitta, our contributor in Gaza, with an update on the situation since the ceasefire took effect. But first, here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. In Gaza, Israel carried out several attacks on Palestinians despite the ceasefire. On Monday, January 20th, a 15-year-old child, Zakaria Humeid Barbach, was shot and killed by an Israeli sniper as he was returning to his home in Rafah. According to video footage, the sniper then shot a man who attempted to rescue the child. On Wednesday, Israeli naval forces reportedly fired shells onto the beach near Gaza City. The Israeli army also attacked Rafah again, killing one person and injuring several others, according to the Wafa news agency. According to reports, an Israeli quadcopter fired rounds at a group of Palestinians clearing wreckage from their destroyed homes in the Shabura camp. Since the ceasefire was implemented on January 19th in Gaza, Palestinians have been returning to their neighborhoods while municipal security and civil defense workers have started to restore infrastructure. Meanwhile, more evidence of Israel's 15 months of continuous war crimes are being revealed. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency says that the bodies of about 10,000 Palestinians who were killed in the genocide and are yet to be found and given proper burials. Along with the Civil Defense's medical staff, the head of the agency, Mahmoud Bassal, said that they have so far recovered approximately 200 bodies since the ceasefire began on Sunday. Bassal said that extraction operations have been challenged by the lack of heavy machinery. He added that Israel had destroyed several of their vehicles and killed at least 100 of their staff. The Reuters news agency spoke to a man, Mohammed Abu Dalfa, whose wife and children, quote, were among 35 of his extended family who were killed when an Israeli airstrike hit the building in Gaza City's Jahjah suburb in December 2023. As bombs continued to fall, only 3 bodies were retrieved. Abu Dalfa told Reuters, quote, "My children are still under the rubble. I am trying to get them out. The civil defense came, they tried, but the destruction makes it difficult. We don't have the equipment here to extract martyrs. We need excavators and a lot of technical tools. My wife was killed along with all my 5 children, 3 daughters and 2 sons. I had triplets," he said. The Geneva-based Euromed Human Rights Monitor called on the so-called international community to pressure Israel to, quote, promptly guarantee the unconditional entry of technical teams, forensic specialists, and criminal investigators into the Gaza Strip, along with the required tools. This will help Palestinians in the Strip recover the bodies of victims from beneath debris and in areas where Israeli forces invaded, identify the victims, and provide information about the whereabouts of those who have not been found, Euromed stated. The rights group added that quote, These actions are essential, not only to safeguard families' rights to know the fate of their loved ones and to bury those who have been killed with dignity and respect, but to ensure accountability for the perpetrators of the genocide that Israel has committed in Gaza Strip for 15 months. Euromed says that during the first few days into the ceasefire, their field teams have documented, quote, vast numbers of Palestinian bodies killed by Israeli shelling over the past few months, many of which have almost completely decomposed. The bodies of 79 people, including 21 unidentified individuals, were recovered in Rafah neighborhoods by ambulance and civil defense crews following the withdrawal of Israeli army forces. Their team found severely decomposed remains of additional victims, quote, of whose skulls and a few bones were all that was left. In October 2024, the United Nations estimated that there were approximately 18,000 children who had lost either one or both parents since the genocide began a year before. Earlier this week, the Director General of the Gaza Government Media Office estimated the number to be around 20,000. But the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza released new statistics today, Thursday, revealing that there are more than 38,000 newly orphaned children since the genocide began. Speaking to Drop Site News this week, Ismail Al-Tawabta, the Director General of the Gaza Government Media Office, said that more than 40% of families across Gaza are caring for orphaned children. Al-Tawabta said, quote, even before the current Israeli war, there were a staggering number of orphans in Gaza, 33,000 children, as a result of 5 previous wars since 2008. In a haunting video, journalist Abdelkader Sabah documented the scene around the wreckage of Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia in the northern Gaza Strip. On December 27th, as we've reported, Israeli forces laid siege to the hospital and abducted its medical staff and patients, including the director of the hospital, pediatrician Hossam Abu Safiya. Abu Safiya is still in Israeli detention at Ofer military prison. Israeli forces had stripped the doctors, patients, their companions, and medical staff of their clothing and marched them to a nearby school that Israel had turned into an interrogation center. Now, nearly 4 weeks later, the clothing and belongings of those people, many of whom are still abducted, remain strewn on the ground. Sabah says, quote, these clothes are a testimony to what the Israeli occupation forces did to the residents of the northern Gaza Strip. On Wednesday, the Palestinian rights group Al-Mizan said that Israeli authorities once again extended the ban prohibiting Dr. Abu Safiya from meeting with his legal representative until February 6th. Quote, we strongly condemn this unlawful decision and urgently demand immediate access for Al-Mizan's lawyer to assess his condition, Al-Mizan stated. The United Nations released a damage assessment report this month that shows that after 15 months of Israel's campaigns of destruction and genocide, more than 50 million tons of rubble will need to be cleared. Released footage of the extent of Israel's destruction across the Gaza Strip is staggering. But workers and staff of the various municipal bodies and security ministries stated over the past few days that they are gearing up to restore, repair, and rebuild. The mayor of Gaza City, Dr. Jahjah al-Sarraj, who is also the head of the Union of Municipalities in the Gaza Strip, announced the launch of the Phoenix Framework for the Reconstruction of Gaza, which he says is a roadmap aimed at the reconstruction and sustainable development of Gaza after the war of extermination and aggression. The initiative, he said, quote, represents a glimmer of hope and a practical plan aimed at addressing current challenges and combines a rapid response to urgent humanitarian needs with laying the foundations for sustainable reconstruction that enhances Gaza's resilience in the long term. Gaza's Ministry of Interior and National Security released a similar statement on Sunday, announcing that they began deployment of police and security forces in the streets across Gaza, quote, in order to support citizens and provide them with aid, secure public and private property, and deal with the remnants of the occupation that pose a threat to the lives of citizens. Some of those security officers deployed by the Gaza government secured the delivery of more than 2,000 aid trucks entering southern Gaza since the ceasefire. According to the United Nations, 915 aid trucks drove into Gaza on Tuesday. Wednesday saw the delivery of more than 800 trucks, the UN stated, adding that the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and its partners are dispatching incoming supplies to designated emergency shelters and distribution centers across the Gaza Strip, distributing food parcels and flour, and working to reopen bakeries. The UN Agency for Palestine Refugees, which the Israeli government is attempting to ban, distributed nearly 120 trucks of more than 53,000 parcels of food to communities sheltering in Khan Yunis and Deir Balah. Meanwhile, the UN Agency for Sexual and Reproductive Health said that 20 trucks carrying critical supplies, including for safe births, emergency obstetric care, postpartum kits, contraceptives, and winter items, were offloaded in Deir Balah on Tuesday. 20 more trucks carrying similar supplies entered northern Gaza on Wednesday. Reporting from Rafah on Wednesday, Al Jazeera's Tarek Abu Azoum said, quote, "Over the past few hours, there has been a continuous, smooth flow of humanitarian aid trucks into Gaza. Since the ceasefire began, it's understood that more than 2,400 aid trucks have been allowed to pass into Gaza. The trucks are carrying food, water, aid supplies, and fuel. More are on the way into Gaza right now," Abu Azoum added. They're being secured by Hamas's police, whose presence has helped mitigate looting. The aid supplies are desperately needed to prevent living conditions from deteriorating further. Their entry has led to a big drop in prices in the markets, helping ensure people can receive necessities. As scholar and media critic Asal Rad stated on social media, quote, "It's crazy how much Blinken and other Biden officials lied for months and months, saying Israel wasn't blocking aid and they were doing everything they could to get aid into Gaza." Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces and their settler foot soldiers have been accelerating their attacks on Palestinians over the past week. Israeli soldiers shot and killed a 14-year-old boy in Sebastia, northwest of Nablus, on January 19th. Defense for Children International Palestine reported that Ahmad Rashid Rushdi Jazar was shot while he and his friends were sitting. Israeli forces, concealed and positioned among the trees, opened fire on the children from a distance of 650 meters. Ahmed was struck with a bullet in the chest, falling onto the ground and bleeding severely. He was pronounced dead at a local hospital. In Jenin and the Jenin refugee camp in the northern West Bank, Israeli forces have killed at least 10 Palestinians and wounded 40 since the military launched a new raid on Tuesday. The raid appears to be in coordination with the Palestinian Authority, the PA. Following a 48-day siege on Jenin and the Jenin refugee camp by the Palestinian Authority, in which the U.S.-backed PA forces besieged the city, shot at unarmed civilians, and killed residents in an attempt to undermine the Palestinian armed resistance group's defenses against Israel, the PA forces joined the Israeli military in a raid on the Al-Razi hospital on Wednesday, according to a report by Fayha Shalash, writing in Middle East Eye. Shalash added that PA forces arrested a wounded man inside the hospital who was accused of being a member of the Jenin battalion and was wanted by the Israeli army. Quote, "The PA raid appeared to be the first time Palestinian forces publicly participated in an Israeli military assault in the West Bank," Shalash reported. The Hamas political party condemned the Palestinian Authority's raid on the Al-Razi hospital, saying that it was a move that, quote, "crosses all red lines and national ethics." Hamas called on all factions and national and community figures in the West Bank to come out with all their strength in order to put an end to the serious violations of the authority and to confront the occupation's aggression and targeting of the resistance fighters in Jenin by escalating the clashes at all points of contact and at military checkpoints and settlements in the West Bank. Palestinian Islamic Jihad also condemned the PA, saying that, quote, "We hold the authority in Ramallah and its security services responsible for for participating and colluding in this aggression after they provided Israel with assistance in imposing a siege on the Jenin camp. Israeli military bulldozers and other vehicles destroyed vital infrastructure in the streets of Jenin as part of the raid. On Tuesday, 3 Palestinian doctors and 2 nurses were injured by Israeli fire in Jenin, according to the Wafa news agency. Also on Tuesday, Israeli forces shot and killed another teenage boy, 16-year-old Motaz Imad Musa Abu Tabih, during the attack on Jenin. 𝐓𝐡𝐞, the Accountability Program Director at Defense for Children International Palestine, said, quote, "As a fragile ceasefire takes hold in Gaza, the Israeli military now turns its attention to Jenin, whose residents have been targeted with lethal force again and again. Palestinian children are still not safe as Israeli forces continue to target Palestinian childhood with impunity." Israeli forces have killed 7 Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank since the beginning of January, according to documentation collected by DCIP. 4 children were killed by Israeli drone strikes, and 3 children were shot and killed with live ammunition. Nearly 2,000 families in Jenin and the refugee camp have been displaced over the last month due to the concurrent sieges by the PA and Israel. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has been scaling up its arrests and abductions of Palestinians in the West Bank and raiding homes of prisoners who are scheduled to be released starting this coming weekend in the first phase of the prisoner swap under the terms of the Gaza ceasefire. Israeli forces abducted dozens of Palestinians in the town of Azoum in the northern West Bank on Monday. Al Jazeera reported that Israeli forces also stormed the town of Der Samit, west of Hebron, raiding homes of prisoners. The military also stormed the Aida camp in Bethlehem, launching a wide-scale arrest campaign. The Palestinian news agency Wafa reported on Wednesday that Israeli forces tightened security for the 3rd consecutive day at most entrances and exits of the governorates in the West Bank. Israeli settlers carried out several attacks across the occupied West Bank this week, including setting fire to homes and shops in towns west of Qalqilia. The Palestinian Red Crescent reports that at least 12 people were injured. The United Nations stated that there has been a surge in access restrictions and attacks in the wake of the establishment of new settler colonial outposts. Last week, Israeli settlers carried out multiple attacks across the Nablus governorate, targeting homes and other properties in Huwara, Kusra, Madama, and Burin villages. In Huwara, settlers injured 4 Palestinians and damaged a commercial shop by stone throwing, and in Burin, settlers set fire to a Palestinian-owned vehicle and an under-construction livelihood structure, the UN stated. The Israeli human rights group B'Tselem reported that settlers backed by the Israeli army threw Molotov cocktails and rioted, injuring 6 Palestinians in the town of Sinjil. On Wednesday, Wafa news agency reported that 5 Palestinians were injured in settler attacks in Masafaryata, south of Hebron. An activist told Wafa that dozens of Israeli settlers attacked residents in Masafaryata, assaulted them, and sprayed tear gas in their faces, which led to the injury of an elderly man. We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight excerpts of this one by Faiha Shalash on the detention of Palestinian children in the West Bank. In her piece, Faiha highlights several children who were abducted and imprisoned under administrative detention, jailed without charges or trial, a draconian practice that Defense for Children International Palestine says has reached a record level over recent months. Faiha writes that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, 17 years old, was arrested by Israeli forces in November 2023. The Israelis destroyed his family's furniture as they stormed their home. Both 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and his friend Ahmad Assaf were beaten by Israeli soldiers and arrested. According to 𝐓𝐡's uncle Mujahid, the Palestinian Authority, which carries out security coordination with Israel, had called 𝐓𝐡 into questioning before he was arrested. The PA had pressured him into signing a pledge that he would not confront Israel's forces of occupation. 2 days later, Israel arrested him. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is being held under administrative detention in Israel's Megiddo prison. A lawyer has only been permitted to visit him there once. The lack of information about 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is adding to his family's anguish. Quote, "We don't know anything about him," said Mujahid, his uncle, "except that he is in the section for children in Megiddo prison." That's an excerpt from Fayha Shalash's article, "Detention Without Charge of Palestinian Children Hits Record Level," on electronicintifada.net. And finally, as we always do, we wanted to share images of people expressing determination and resilience in the aftermath of Israel's 15-month campaign of destruction in Gaza. This photo of Palestinians laying out the measurements for a home on the ground cleared of rubble was posted by Tamer Nahid in Gaza with the caption, "We will rebuild it." Journalist Yusuf Fares took this video of Palestinians returning to Jabalia refugee camp and clearing rubble. Yusuf asked this teenager, Muad, what he's doing. Muad says, quote, "Well, I'm trying to build a tent." Yusuf says, quote, "These are the people of the camp, a beehive. People are starting to return. While it's true the situation is difficult and tragic, this all says and indicates one thing. It shows the Palestinians' relationship with the land that is soaked with the blood of their sons. It turns into a cipher that the occupation army will never understand. Their plan, all this destruction, indicates that there was a premeditated expulsion plan. But they truly don't understand who we are and what our relationship with the land that we water with the blood of our sons truly is."
الآن في المخيم وهذا معاذ. يعطيك العافية معاذ.
الله يعافيك.
ايش بتعمل يا كبير؟
والله نحاول ننظف نعمل خيمة هيك.
شو؟
نعمل خيمة.
الله يعطيك الصحة يا معاذ. شد شو. الله يعطيك العافية. هذا معاذ. وهذول.
And finally, the Samir Project, a mutual aid organization in Gaza, posted this video of Palestinians singing and playing traditional folk songs. The Samir Project says, quote, "Palestinian folk songs traditionally tell stories of fishing, harvesting olive trees, of culture, and of everyday life. They also tell stories of resistance and fighting for freedom, since these two have been intrinsically part of the Palestinian identity over the span of 76 years of occupation. Listen to the joy and hope echoed in the voices of the men singing loudly, chanting about their homeland. Despite the pain and suffering of the past 15 months plus, Palestinians in Gaza remain steadfast and celebrate the stop to the aggression and bombardments and continue to be hopeful for liberation." That's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abou. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. Thank you so much for that. It's just been such a momentous week. It feels like, I don't know, much longer that we were lost on Sunday. That morning, the ceasefire took effect finally.
Yeah.
And there was such relief and joy across Gaza. And here we are on day 5. It is largely holding. There have been some horrific incidents of Israeli forces shooting at Palestinians, which I'm sad to say is the norm. Right. But the massacres, the daily massacres, have stopped. So that's really, really good news. And just seeing people returning to their homes and finding so much destruction. To me, it's amazing because we had seen the destruction, but not everyone in Gaza had seen it or known its exact extent. And so now people, I think, are starting to realize just how severe it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these images, these drone videos that Palestinian journalists are finally able to fly over their neighborhoods to document the destruction. It is unbelievable. The amount of just sadistic damage that the Israeli army intended. They intended to wipe Gaza off the map. They bragged about it. They boasted about it. This was policy. As we'll hear from our guest, coming up, there will be consequences. It is just unbelievable. I mean, our contributor, Abu Bakr Abed, has been just walking around central Gaza the last few days, and you can go to his Twitter and see the videos that he's been posting. In total shock and disbelief at the amount of destruction, just complete, he was holding up children's toys that were, that he could salvage from the wreckage, and seeing just the, relentlessness of this destruction, and the nature of this genocide on every single aspect of people's lives in Gaza. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to take generations in terms of assessing and rebuilding from the trauma. But Palestinians, as I noted in the report, are already rebuilding the physical structures. There are traffic police now helping to clear the roads.
From the first hour. From the first
hour, exactly. Yeah. Our contributor, Asim al-Nabih, who's the spokesperson for the Gaza municipality, posted just like an hour or two into the ceasefire that Gaza had already, that Gaza City had already planned the reopening of these streets, these major thoroughfares in the major city of Gaza, and they were working to reopen. So we're going to see also a lot more stories like that. Obviously.
Yeah. Well, we were going to go straight to Gaza now and talk with Donya Abu Sitta, but we had some difficulties with the connection. We've been trying to figure that out in the background, but we may be able to get her on a little later in the program.
Great.
But we're going to go straight to our next guest now, and this is something we've been really looking forward to. But let me just remind everyone that you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream, and I'm Ali Abu Nerma here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. The ceasefire that took effect last Sunday morning brought an end to Israel's horrific massacres that claimed dozens and sometimes hundreds of lives of men, women, and children in Gaza every day over the last 15 months. The official death toll of Israel's genocide of 46,000 is widely considered a gross undercount. And already, as people return to the ruins of their homes, they're finding the remains of loved ones whose fate had been unknown. The ceasefire agreement and the announcements of various governments involved in mediating it are silent about the question of accountability for Israeli crimes, whose scale and savagery is difficult to comprehend and may not be fully uncovered for years. In his statement welcoming the ceasefire agreement, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres talked about the need to urgently mobilize humanitarian assistance for people in Gaza and called for, quote, a credible political path towards a negotiated two-state solution, among other so-called broader goals. Guterres also said, quote, I pay tribute to the civilians who have lost their lives, including UN personnel and humanitarian workers, end quote. The Secretary General's passive wording does not make any reference to who killed all these people, including an unprecedented number of UN and humanitarian workers, more than 300 during 2024. And his statement makes no mention whatsoever of accountability for the perpetrators of this genocide, a shocking, though sadly unsurprising, abandonment of the principles of the United Nations that he is supposed to uphold. There is, however, one organization that does take justice for the victims of Israel's genocide in Gaza secretly, the Hind Rajab Foundation. It uses offensive litigation to hold responsible those involved in atrocities against Palestinians. It is named after Hind Rajab, a 5-year-old Palestinian girl who is in a car with her family trying to escape the Israeli onslaught in Gaza when they were attacked. The story of Hind, trapped all alone in a car, surrounded by dead relatives, pleading over the phone for rescue, a conversation that was recorded by the Palestinian Red Crescent, is among the most poignant and brazen crimes committed during Israel's genocide. As the sound of Israeli fire approached, Red Crescent paramedics Yusuf El-Zino and Ahmed El-Madhoun set out to rescue Hind as their colleagues at headquarters tried to keep the terrified child calm on the phone. But despite coordination with the Israeli forces, the rescue was not to be. In an act of unspeakable perfidy, the Israelis who gave permission for the rescue would open fire, killing Hind and the 2 paramedics. Next week, on January 29th, will be the first anniversary of Hind's murder. Dyab Abu Jahjah is a Belgian-Lebanese political activist and writer, and he is the co-founder of the Hind Rajab Foundation. Dyab is also the co-founder of its parent organization, the March 30 movement, named after Land Day. The movement focuses on changing the narrative revolving around the right of indigenous peoples to their land and sovereignty and the devastating effects of uncontrolled globalization. We're pleased and honored to welcome Dyab Abu Jahjah to the Electronic Intifada live stream. Welcome, Dyab.
Thank you very much. The honor is all mine.
Thank you so much, Dyab. So let me start by asking you, collecting information about suspected Israeli war criminals is an enormous task. Tell us how you started doing this work and how you were able to accomplish this given the scale of the genocide in Gaza.
Right. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm a long-time follower of the Electronic Intifada. You have been doing pioneering work on many levels, so thank you for being here. It's an honor. Let me start by saying that, in 2023, when the genocide started in November, a group of activists came together in Belgium and the Netherlands thinking of doing something about it. And when we started thinking what we could do, we wanted to add something to the enormous effort that has been going on now for more than 15 months in terms of mobilization and activism. So we wanted to do something else than demonstration and advocacy, which is obviously very necessary and needed, but is being done and being done brilliantly all across the board. So we were thinking, what can we add? And we noticed that we have a lot of lawyers amongst ourselves, and then we decided to do something mostly legally, right? So we started thinking also what we could do legally differently, because you have the obvious roots of international law, meaning international legal bodies like the ICC or the ICJ. And the ICJ is something reserved for states, and the ICC is a kind of a hybrid body. It can be accessed by individuals as well, but only in terms of information. And so we wanted to look at other avenues, and we noticed that actually nobody was working, or at least nobody we knew about was working on the binational soldiers who are carrying the nationalities of other countries, but also serving in the Israeli armed forces and committing crimes in Gaza at that moment. So we started investigating that aspect of the genocide. And as you all know, the Israeli soldiers themselves have been publishing these videos from the beginning of the onslaught on Gaza, which is a marking, characteristics of their generation. It's very natural. I have children their age, and that they post everything, and they acted like their generation, actually posting everything. But this created a very interesting situation in terms of war crimes that they are committing, which gave people actually access to the crimes themselves, actually in forms of confession. And this is the first time that this happens on this scale and such atrocities. It happened before. This is not the first time at all, but at this scale, this is the first time. So we started analyzing that evidence. So when you ask about the research was mainly an analysis process of the open source information that was provided by the suspects themselves. So when we started analyzing it, we found a lot of incriminating stuff. So we looked at it obviously from a perspective of looking for crimes committed. We found a lot of crimes committed, and then we started filing cases. And immediately we noticed that we have struck a nerve somewhere, with the other side, the Israeli side, because we immediately noticed a reaction, a pushback, a hysterical reaction in the Netherlands, because we started experimenting in the Netherlands for historical reasons. We have always had a strong network in the Netherlands and Belgium, so it was logical for us to start there. And we immediately noticed a very strong pushback against lawyers that were involved, against also organizers. For example, very fast after the first cases, the Netherlands government mobilized Interpol against myself and other people. I received a visit at home from the Belgian police, totally embarrassed, saying, sorry to knock on your door on a Sunday, but we must, because the Netherlands government, the Dutch government is asking you to delete these tweets, which were tweets referring to litigation, right? So there were attempts to intimidate us very, very, very fast. And then we realized, oh, maybe we're onto something. So they clearly don't like when cases are filed against individuals, individual soldiers. I mean, they don't like that. This seems to be, and we started analyzing this strategy, and maybe we can talk about it later, but we realized this is the way to go for many reasons. And yeah, since then we have been doing this. The March 30 movement at a certain moment decided to create a new organization to streamline all litigation and to only focus on litigation, for the simple reason that, when you say a movement, you obviously say ideas, principles, you say also a bit of ideology and membership. And not everybody who wants to work for justice in Gaza or for the victims of the genocide in Gaza is willing to endorse an ideological platform or any other thing. So we thought this might kind of jeopardize the work a little bit. So let's start something where people do not have to become member. They do not have to have any ideological alignment with us as organizers, but just can volunteer for the legal work as such. And this is the Hind Rajab Foundation.
Dyab, let's talk about some of the specific cases you're starting to work on. Just a few days ago, the Hind Rajab Foundation announced that you filed an urgent legal complaint against Sergeant Mori Kaysar of the Israeli military's Givati Brigade. The complaint, filed under Spanish and international law, accuses Kaysar of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes in Gaza. Can you tell us a little bit about that case and some of the other cases you're bringing in other countries? What are you asking these courts in those countries to do?
Right. This case is typical of the strategy we have been using against what we call visiting soldiers. Let me clarify first that we work on 3 tiers. The first and the most important is the dual nationals. Regarding the dual nationals, we are not under any restraint of time because they have the nationality of these countries, and these countries have jurisdiction over them. For example, if you're Belgian have jurisdiction over you. Even if you later denounce your Belgian nationality, it's related to the moment of committing the crime. You were a Belgian citizen, that remains the case. So we are not under pressure to move fast on these. We learned that very early because we started filing cases a lot, like almost 13 months ago in the Netherlands, and then we realized we should slow down a little bit with the dual nationals and take our time and work in the depth and prepare them better, right? So that we can, minimize the chances of the other side of rebuting our arguments or, going around them. So this remains our priority, but we are working slowly on this. We are working also with a lot of. We try to develop complete cases also with plaintiffs. That means victims. For example, if somebody destroyed a home, we try to find the victim, the owner of that home, and ask a power of attorney to our lawyers, and then build up a case also from both ends of the story, not just towards the perpetrator, but the victim. So that's the most important thing. That's our strategy. The most important strategy we're using. The second is visiting soldiers, just like 𝐄𝐿 and Spain, but also many other cases like the Brazilian case against Yuval Baghdadi and other cases before him, the Cyprus case, for example. These were important cases. In this case, we are not talking about dual nationals. We are not aware, at least, that these individuals have another nationality other than the Israeli one. So the jurisdiction is activated by the fact of them visiting another country. So when they are on the territory of these countries, there is jurisdiction to these countries under their own statute, but also under even the Geneva Convention to undergo investigations against them for war crimes if we can prove reasonable doubt. So these cases are time sensitive because their visit is mostly a week or 2 weeks. So we have to move fast. We have to file the cases fast, and sometimes we have to communicate about them fast because we need to move the public opinion. Otherwise, in some countries, nothing will happen. So you need to create a pressure, public pressure, in order to maybe get something done. More interesting than the 𝐄𝐿 case in Spain is the Cyprus case of a few weeks ago, and the Brazil case. In the Cyprus case, an Israeli soldier who committed war crimes visited the country, and we immediately realized that Cyprus is not going to do anything. We filed the case. Our first action is always to keep silence and wait to see if there's a reaction from the prosecution. This did not happen, and all our contacts in Cyprus were telling us that the political biotope will not allow that to happen in Cyprus, because as you know, the DA or prosecution is a hybrid position. It's not purely judicial, it's partly political, so it's susceptible for political considerations. So we were advised to communicate about it, to create public pressure. We did that. That was picked up by Cypriotic media, and immediately an investigation was opened. When that was opened, the Israelis smuggled the soldier out of Cyprus, and that was the first case of smuggling a soldier out of the country. And when I say smuggling, I'm not exaggerating, because we have information that he was even taken by a private jet. I wonder whether he underwent any passport control on his way out. We don't know. The Israelis themselves said that it was a joint operation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Justice, meaning Shin Bet and Mossad, actually, in other words. So then we realized, okay, this is getting interesting. And then I think a few weeks after that, in another case in Brazil, very similar case, we detected a presence. We filed the case against Yuval Baghdadi, who destroyed homes in the Netzarim area, and he was boasting about it, and there was no combat situation. So we filed the case, and we kept silence in Brazil because we had faith in the Brazilian judiciary system. And that wasn't a wrong assessment, because soon after, I think like a week after the case was filed, a judge, the prosecution passed the case to a judge, and a judge issued a probe order. That means intercept and investigate, interrogate, and maybe hold the suspect. Unfortunately, at that moment, when the order was communicated to the police in Brazil, there was a leak somewhere. We cannot say where, but it happened only after the police knew about it, and the Israelis started lobbying politicians in Brazil to block justice, and eventually also smuggled Baghdadi to Argentina, where we filed a case against him immediately in Argentina. Then they smuggled him from Argentina. In Argentina, we can say he traveled, not smuggled. He traveled from Argentina to Miami, and then he left from there to Tel Aviv. So these are not dual nationals. These are Israeli soldiers who we have a window of opportunity when they travel into a country to activate jurisdiction against them. So these are the most important tiers. The third tier of our work is international law. We work with the ICC. We have filed a case there against 1,000 soldiers. Our main goal of that is archiving, is to archive the data. That's our main goal. But our focus remains on the individual soldiers, especially the dual nationals.
Well, that's incredible, and that they would send a private jet to bring out this soldier who knows what he was doing, maybe just going on a vacation to relax and have fun after participating in a genocide. Who knows what he was doing there? But and the Israeli military has recently warned its soldiers not to travel abroad precisely for fear they could be arrested. And the press reports in the Israeli media make specific reference to the work of the Hind Rajab Foundation, as we can see from this recent article in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. That's already a considerable impact of your work. It is making the world much smaller for these people. But I know that's not the limit of your goal. Do you think we will really see any of these people actually brought to trial and punished in a court of law? And I ask that because it just has always seemed out of reach for Palestinians to get that kind of justice. Could we finally see it happen now?
Let me start by saying that on the level of, let me start somewhat technical to explain something in terms of that question, which is the most important question, because as you rightly said, our goal is actually to achieve justice, not just to scare them out of vacation, which is maybe a good side effect of things, because these people committed atrocities. We are not filing cases against any individual Israeli soldiers. We are filing cases against, even though we might argue, and I think rightly, that we could, because anybody who is contributing or participating to this criminal endeavor is by association deserving of being brought to court. But in awaiting the decision of the ICJ, which will come within 2 years, we expect, we are focusing on war crimes. War crimes are individually committed. So when we accuse somebody of war crime, we can obviously also add genocide to it, because we suspect it, but the main accusation is war crimes, right? Why? To make it individual. So these people all committed atrocities. They all committed crimes that are verifiable and confessed to them on video. So when they are losing sleep over this and not being able of leaving Thailand, because this smuggling situation happened in Thailand, in Sri Lanka, and in Amsterdam, even with 3 soldiers. So there were almost 30 cases where the Israelis are telling about that they actually asked the soldier to leave a country due to our actions. So when that happens, it is already some form of accountability. It's a good side effect, but the goal is to have justice in court, as you rightfully pointed out. So regarding that, when it comes to the visiting soldiers, we don't know about that. It's always a long shot, because you have a lot of hurdles when you have always that debate on jurisdiction. These countries will always try, even the most friendly countries to the Palestinian cause, will always try to avoid or to escape jurisdiction, to say, look, this is not our problem, all our sympathies, but he's not a citizen of our country, the crime was not committed here, and it's not our problem. So there's always a battle to prove jurisdiction, to prove that we can actually go after them. Now, when we go to the dual nationals, it's a total different story. The dual nationals, the debate on jurisdiction is not existing. These countries have jurisdiction because these people, the perpetrators, have the nationality. The other debate that is not also present is that on immunity. obviously, because they are not prime ministers, they are not ministers. So this is the importance of the dual national dossiers, and that's why we are taking our time. I personally believe we are hoping, of course, to have also, I mean, in Brazil, it was a close call. I mean, actually, a judge said, let's look at this guy, bring him. So that's very close to possibly holding him if he stayed in the country, but he was smuggled out. So the visiting soldier aspect can lead, maybe, if we are lucky, if we fall on some courageous judges, some courageous persecutors, can lead maybe to justice. So we'll keep doing that. But the dual nationals, we have faith that that will lead to at least some convictions in a court of law. For example, we are preparing 13 cases now in Belgium. We are taking our time with that. We are working on them for more than a year now. These cases are complete from both ends of a legal procedure, in the sense that they are being filed by plaintiffs, by victims, people who lost their homes, who lost loved ones, who themselves, some of them were injured. These plaintiffs are citizens of Belgium or residents of Belgium, creating a strong link to Belgium with their plea. On the other hand, you have Belgian citizens who have been committing atrocities. And then the work is to correlate these, the crimes with the suspects. And this work is being done. And we are doing the same in the Netherlands. We are doing the same in other countries as well, working slowly and taking our time on these dual national cases. I believe that this will lead to convictions. And I cannot predict how long this will take. But for example, I know the Belgian legal system better than any other legal system. So I can tell in Belgium, for example, when you file a case based on plaintiffs, direct victims, you circumvent the prosecution. You go directly to an investigative judge. So just to give you an idea what will happen in Belgium, and let's hope within a few months, we'll start filing these cases because they are almost ready. So then already a judge is investigating and not a prosecutor, not a DA, which gives the whole thing much more independence and much more immunity towards political influence, etc. So my answer is absolutely, we are hopeful and we feel that there is a real chance when it comes to the dual nationals. And let me add something to that. The fact that we are filing this under national courts is another protection. And I'll give an example. The United States have that law or act called the Hague Invasion Act, where they actually say if an American citizen is ever brought in front of the ICC, the United States have the right to invade Holland and actually free that guy, right? So this is already there. And now with the Congress passing this resolution on sanctioning ICC, it's actually totally absurd, and you see clearly there's no respect to any form of international law. But imagine this. Imagine the Hind Rajab Foundation with an American lawyer, an American victim, American Palestinian victim, filing a case in front of an American court against an American citizen. Even Donald Trump cannot tell you, this is disrespecting the United States, because how is that? This is an American citizen with an American lawyer filing a case in an American court against another American citizen. This is actually respecting American judiciary. This is respecting American courts. So this is the strength of the strategy towards national courts. It cannot be blocked geopolitically. Even the most hostile people against, let's say, international law cannot say that, some of them do say that, but they cannot, with a lot of credibility claim that their own courts in their own countries should not be able of looking at their own citizens when they are committing crimes, because this is the whole essence of a legal system.
And just a very quick follow-up on this, Dyab, and without getting too technical, but you're focusing on criminal cases, but your mention of the United States makes me wonder, would you also consider civil litigation against individuals too? Is that part of this discussion?
These are very important questions, and this is indeed the important debate that we are having now with our American legal team and our allies in America, legal bodies that are, advising us. We're in contact with them. This is the debate. Are we going to just focus on criminal law? And this makes our task very complicated in the United States because these are in federal crimes, and then the DA system is quite politicized, and so it's very complicated. Or should we also resort to tort cases and civil cases? This debate is ongoing. We are still developing our strategy for the United States, but it's coming. It's coming. We are looking at all kind of options. We have a strong team there, and we are talking to different actors on the ground who wants to give us advice. So at the end of the day, we will develop strategy. I cannot answer it yet, but this is actually the debate ongoing, or one of the debates ongoing. Another part of the debate is there any possibility in state law, for example? This is also something we are researching now. It's not very obvious, but we are working on that.
And it just takes one prosecutor, one judge to rule that one soldier has committed war crimes and crimes of genocide in order to set a precedent.
Absolutely.
So it's very significant.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, as the work of the Hind Rajab Foundation gains prominence, we're starting to see coordinated smear campaigns, of course, against you and your colleagues. For an example, an article in Haaretz, Israel's supposedly most liberal newspaper, earlier this month, calls you a, quote, Islamic extremist and tries to discredit you. This is, the same newspaper that we showed just a few minutes ago, talking about, the work of the Hind Rajab Foundation. What's your reaction to these types of attacks? And are you concerned about Israel potentially trying to sabotage your work? You're based in Belgium. Are you facing any obstacles from other governments, or the Belgian government in particular?
Right. Yeah, actually, there are different things happening at the time. I mean, we knew there will be pushback eventually. And as I mentioned earlier, the pushback started, or some of it started earlier. But things escalated after, especially the Brazil case. Already with the Cyprus case, we knew that, for example, I think 𝐓𝐻𝐿 wrote that there's a special commission that was created between Shin Bet and Mossad to monitor the situation. So that was already the case after the Cyprus case, the Livman case. But after the Baghdadi case, that exploded, and that went out of hand in the sense that not only in the media, which you'd expect, Hasbara and smear campaigns. I mean, these guys are calling the ICC Hamas, even, so what do you expect to call somebody like me who's from Lebanon, who's openly pro-resistance and, not very strategic when it comes to communication outside of the Hind Rajab Foundation, because I make a clear difference, which is, I think, professionally sound. When I talk for the Hind Rajab Foundation, I stick to the MO of the foundation. But when I have the right to have my own opinions, and on my own, X channel, I speak my own opinion. So, and obviously somebody like me is for them, obviously, a terrorist, and he's an Islamist. Even if I'm agnostic, it doesn't matter. I'm Islamist. This is how the way of their propaganda anyway. So this is not surprising, and I'm not really very, let's say, this doesn't keep me awake at night. But on the other hand, for Haaretz, this is just it's very unfortunate for them if they want to see themselves as a serious newspaper to publish rubbish like that without fact checking, at least with their Belgian colleagues, and then they can get a profile. But let us put that aside, because the important, I think, or let's say the threatening aspect of what they're doing is on the level of the state, right? So they are trying to disrupt, and we know that they are trying to disrupt in various ways. So there have been also childish threats, one might say, and some other people maybe. Like a minister, 𝐄𝐥𝐿, from the government already, was coming to troll during the Brazilian case involving Eduardo Bolsonaro. He's a member of the federal police in Brazil. We spoke about the possible leak, right? So I'm not saying anything, but he was in touch with Eduardo Bolsonaro, the son of and who is a commander in the police in Brazil, and he sent him a dossier on how I'm a terrorist and etc. And I just answered simply when he came trolling, look, just take good lawyers. I mean, we're just filing legal cases, and if you say there's nothing at hand, there's nothing worth cases, fine then. Why the fuss? Just take a lawyer. And his answer was clear, very telling. He said, "No, what's your pager?" So for me, I mean, it can be a silly joke, but I think it's worse than that. I think it's just saying like, look, this is not how we will deal with this. And luckily, the Belgian state takes these things seriously. And I must say, I'm very grateful I'm not in another country in Europe, because you have several countries in Europe who are very aligned with the Israeli policy. Belgium is not. Belgium is, I would say, correct when it comes to its own citizens nowadays. There have been other times. But immediately I was contacted by the Belgian security services, and actually, I have a tendency of taking these things lightly, and they told me, no, this is not something to be taken lightly, because they said it might reflect an atmosphere within the cabinet, because this guy is member of that government, and he said it's a stupid joke. Yeah, he's stupid to say that. I'm sure he regretted, said the guy from the Secret Service here. But it might reflect that atmosphere, so you have to pay attention. And I'm living since then in some kind of I have protection from the state, from a security body here, which is something that's I'm in awe of that. It has an impact on your life. I'm a teacher, so I cannot teach anymore because I cannot have a routine now. I'm like forbidden by having a routine. I mean, for my own protection. Obviously, my colleagues and my students were also afraid a little bit. So things are kind of heavy on that level. But this will not disrupt our work. I mean, it's kind of naive of them to think that the work of the foundation depends on a person, whether it is me or anybody else. We are all replaceable. And at the end of the day, I'm a spokesperson and a coordinator, and we have other coordinators. And the work is already beyond stopping. It is an institution. The foundation in 3 months had an enormous, exponential growth in terms of human resources, in terms of legal capabilities. We have legal teams across the planet, very capable people. Our data is spread across the planet, from Japan to Chile. It's on blockchain technology. It's unhackable, practically unerasable. And there's nothing they can do. This is happening, and they can take me out one way or the other, or take somebody else out. They cannot take the foundation out. Or even if they did, even if they took the Hind Rajab Foundation out as an institute, this idea has been launched. The MO, our way of doing things now, is out there, and people can create new organization that will do exactly the same thing. So yeah, I think the only thing, the only thing they should do is take good lawyers. That's, at the end of the day, this is the only wise thing that they should do.
That's really extraordinary, Dyab, that you have to live under protection. And it's good to know that the Belgian state does take this seriously. And they would know very well that the threat from Israel is real. But that just also goes to show the criminality of this state that we're dealing with, that there is a real concern they would resort to terrorism. And we certainly hope more than anything that you and your colleagues will be safe. But the point you make is an important one. I mean, I don't want to stray too far from their topic, but it has always been a mistake that they have made in thinking that if you take out the leadership of any kind of movement or any kind of people, that somehow that diminishes it or weakens it or discourages people, when we've seen throughout history that the opposite has been the case. And the fact that you're going to such extraordinary lengths to ensure that the data, the cases, and so on is protected is, I'm sure, very reassuring for everyone who's watching. And I know that everyone who's watching and who will watch has a similar question before we let you go, which is, how can people support the mission of the Hind Rajab Foundation to bring the perpetrators of this genocide to justice? How can they get involved? How can they support you? How can we make this global mission for justice even bigger?
Yeah, thank you for asking this. I mean, the most important part is, I think, create awareness around the foundation, spread the word about what we're doing. That will create some kind of shield. Even though, as you said, if certain the Israeli state does not act like a state, it acts like a criminal organization, and this might not be sufficient, but at least awareness, creating awareness around our work is an important part of supporting us, of protecting us. The other element, obviously, is volunteering or donating for the foundation. We have been receiving a lot of volunteers, which is great. A lot of very interesting people, are part of our project now, and they are contributing every day in terms of their skills and know-how. We are always in need with new, legal profiles anywhere, whether paralegal or lawyers. We're always looking for those. There's never enough. So lawyers, please, volunteer with us. Paralegal profiles, please. Programmers, developers, we're always looking for those, because we are now also building a huge, IT infrastructure that needs maintaining and sustaining and development. So also these profiles are very, very sought after, but also all kind of profiles as well. And of course, donations. We are an independent organizations. We do not receive subsidies out of principles. We reject them pro forma. So why? Because we want to keep our independence. We only accept donations from people. So we do not accept funding from foundations or groups or states or anything. Just people can donate to us. And so please, this is the only way we have also enough resources to pay our because we have also external lawyers. When we file cases, like in Brazil, for example, we hire law firms. What we're going to do in America, our own in-house lawyers prepare the paralegal work, but we will hire law firms. And you all know that these are not cheap organizations. So donations are always welcome. And donations can only happen through the website. So this is the only way to donate. We do not accept any other forms because we are under extreme scrutiny. So we are only receiving donations through the website, which goes through credit card or bank donations.
Thank you. And for those who are listening, that website is we had it up a second ago. I want to make sure that I say it correctly. It is hindrajabfoundation.org, hindrajabfoundation.org, where people can find out more about the incredible work you and your colleagues are doing, and also how to help support the work in all the ways that you just mentioned. Dyab, we are so grateful for your time. We know how busy you are.
My pleasure.
But we were so excited to talk to you, and we know that people are eager to learn more about the work you're doing. We wish you great success, and we hope that you'll come back at some point in the future and tell us about the developments with this work. We wish you the best of success with it. Thank you so much, Dyab.
Thank you for having me, and always a pleasure to come back and talk to you anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, it's just, I mean, the word important doesn't do any justice. This is the work that must be done. It is essential. And I'm so in awe of these lawyers and volunteers and supporters who are, meticulously combing through these very public social media archives of these genociders who bragged about committing these war crimes. Just amazing. And so we will have much more to come from Hind Rajab Foundation and the work that they're doing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, we're
Yeah, it's really inspiring work. It's one of those things that gives me hope, because it's not just about, of course we want to see the results. Of course we want to see people brought to justice. for these crimes, but it's also about building the movement, increasing the number of people who are involved, making the world a more hostile place for these criminals and a safer place for everyone else. So it's really important work.
That's right. Well, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with Ali Abunimah, and we want to bring back on our colleague, our dear contributor, Donya Abu Sitta, who had to travel, again, a long distance to access stable, reliable internet in Gaza. Donya, it's so good to see you. Can you hear us?
See you. Hello?
Excellent. Hi. So it's a little choppy, but we'll make it work.
Yes.
Donya, tell us about the last few days in Gaza, what it's been like in the wake of the ceasefire, and what you've been noticing, what you've been seeing, what people are telling you about finally being able to return to their neighborhoods. We might have lost her.
Yeah, it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle to get the connection. We'll try again because we really want to talk to Donya, and it's so important to keep people in Gaza front and center and to hear them through every way that we can. And we're proud that from the very beginning of this horrific genocide, we've been able to be a platform for them, whether it's through live interviews or through the fantastic articles we publish, including by Donya, or by the other kinds of reporting we do. So we're just going to see if we can connect with Donya. We'll give it here we go.
Are you with us, Donya?
Hello?
Hi.
Do you hear me?
Yes, finally. That's a great connection. So tell us a little bit about what the last few days have been like for you.
Right.
Now, finally, after 470 days, I can call myself as a survivor. I witness for every crime in this war, and it's shameful to see all these victims without and while I'm unable to do anything. Now I will share you a poem which reflects the reactions of my students when they hear that there is a ceasefire in next 2 days.
Donya, do you want me to read it? I'll read it. Okay, sorry, I have to put my glasses on. A child, grown old before his time, asks me, his voice trembling, "What does a ceasefire mean?" I want to shout, "It's just a mockery." Yet in his eyes a glimmer of hope I see. I answer, "The machines of death will cease. No more missiles will pierce the skies with ease. The war will pause, but at what price?" He responds, "Will no one die?" His heart filled with fright. I want to say, "Yes, peace will take flight." But then I saw the truth, so dear and bright. There's death in want, in cold, and in the night. Another child asks, his voice filled with pain, about tomorrow, about playing again, about the life that war has stolen from him.
That I think really captures what we'll try again to get Donya back. But to me, that really captures the sort of maelstrom of different emotions, joy, celebration, and yet the wounds haven't healed. The destruction is immense. Getting back to any kind of normal life just seems like a monumental challenge. I think people are proud of themselves that they survived this, and yet at the same time You think of the trauma and the fear of children who are half the population in Gaza, who many of whom, the majority, I mean, 15 months is a long time for anyone, but for some of these children, it's most of their life. And that's just extraordinary to think about, having spent most of their lives in this genocide.
It is. It is. Donya, okay, are you back? Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, we read your poem. It
I'm
was
sorry.
beautiful.
The internet is bad connection, so it's interrupted many times, and
okay.
I will continue. But okay.
Please.
I cannot remember where I was.
We just read your poem.
Read the poems. Yeah. A child grown old for his times asked me, his voice trembling, what does a ceasefire mean? I want to shout, it's just a murky. Yet in his eyes, a glimmer of hope I see. I answer, the machines of death will cease. No more muscles will rest the skies with ease. The war will pause, but at what price? He responds, will no one die? His heart filled with flight. I want to say, yes, peace will take flight. But then I saw the truth, so clear and bright. There is death in want, in cold, in night. Another child asked me, his voice filled with pain, about tomorrow, about playing again, about life that war has stolen from him.
It's beautiful.
Thank you, Donya. And that poem was inspired by... Yeah. I wanted to ask, that poem was inspired by the children you work with. You're a teacher. Tell us more about how your children, the children you teach, have been reacting to the ceasefire in the last few days. Tell us more about what they've been going through since the ceasefire.
Yes, let us let us take a tour for the first day of the ceasefire. Let's take a flashback. On Sunday, 8:30 p.m., the ceasefire was supposed to stop, but does Israeli adhere to the agreement? Surely not. At 9:30 a.m. in Rafah city, which is the south city in Gaza Strip, a small child was walking in the street, and the tank was shouted and targeted him. Another man tried to help him, but also all targeting continued on everywhere in the place. The child was killed. Let's see these videos for people who are returning to Rafah city.
I don't know if we have the video. Oh, there. Okay, here we go.
They are people returning to Rafah city, which all destroyed. Every building, every home, every street was destroyed. There is nothing support or help people to live in this city. And to rebuild the city, it will take more time than we can imagine.
Donya, in terms of the first few days since the ceasefire, are you seeing people being able to finally purchase regular items in the markets again? Are people able to buy food? Are people able to restore their water tanks and once again get clean water for themselves and their children? What are you seeing in terms of the impact that, the United Nations said that there had been, I think, more than 2,400 aid trucks that have come in since Sunday. Are you seeing any impact of that on the ground?
Yeah, there is a bad impact, or actually, it's ensure that's painful impact for people who return to their homes and they found their kids or sons killed under the rubbles, and they take their loans and burn them. And also, in another side, there is people finding alive. It's feel like there is two completely opposite lives in Gaza. Some people find lives in somewhere, and another lost life because they maybe lost their children, their homes, their dreams, and so on. And also, we called it a ceasefire. But in my opinion, I feel that it's a joke. In the first hours of that, support, there is a ceasefire. There are many targeting. One of them was a car targeting in the middle of Khan Yunis, which I displaced near to my place. And then after that, they announced that the ceasefire will start on 11:15, and the past day they announced that it will start on 8:30, and people know that and start working and returning to their homes from 8:30, and then they shouted them and claimed that the ceasefire will start on 11:15.
Donya, are you seeing any aid coming into Gaza? Are you seeing more food, more medicine, tents? Is that now coming into Gaza where you are? Are you seeing any impact from more aid coming in?
Until now, not. Until now, not. But there is organizations that tell us they give the ads, and they didn't to give it to people around me because it takes time to start these operations.
And are people able to, we heard that a lot of people returned to the areas where they were living before the war. Are they staying in those areas, or are they coming back to the tent camps that they were living in when they were displaced during the war?
Surely there is no family lives in Rafah city, but many families return to Rafah city just to take it over. Is the home stand, or it is damaged or destroyed or completely or partly? But then they return to the area that which is displaced in. For example, there is a Hamoud families. When he returned to the homes, he was searching under the rubble for anything they can found. His father outside asking him what you can find under the rubble. He told his father that he is find his t-shirt and some clothes of them and so on. And his father asked him to research for a specific t-shirt, which is a green t-shirt, because it's a special one for him, and he loved him so much. And also at the same time, he after a seconds asked him just to search for a specific or an important document or papers, and after that he must to get out quickly because maybe the rubble fell on him and he injured and harmed himself. So the father asked the sons just to bring the important documents, and if you didn't find it, leave quickly because I don't want you to injure or harm yourself.
Donya, I'm sure that people are going through extraordinary emotions, happy that the bombing has stopped, but discovering the scale of the destruction finding, as you said, loved ones who may be under the rubble. And there are going to be many difficult stories and days ahead. And we hope that you will continue to come back regularly to tell us about them, both on the live stream and in your writing at the Electronic Intifada. I want to say on behalf of all of us how much admiration we have for you, for your family, for all of your colleagues in Gaza who continued to work during this horrible genocide to keep us informed and to share your stories with the world. We appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts, and we send our love to you, and especially to all the children that you work with. We send them all a big hug and a big kiss from all of us.
I thank you so much, but also I wanted to tell another story also for people, two families in Jabalia. The two families entered to an argument about the remains of a human body. Each family was claimed as for his sons, and there is a third one come and he said this remains for us because it's one of him relatives, and there is a ring in his finger, and he searched in the remains and find the ring, and he take the remains to burn their relatives. And the two other families start to an endless journey to search about their sons who killed under the rubble, and they didn't know anything. So people here in Gaza start a painful war, more than bombing and targeting, because they are now searching for a body of their lives, a body of their relatives, because they don't any things about them. Just this, they are missing. There are more than 10,000 people are missing here in Gaza, and no one know anything about them.
It's
Donya,
extraordinarily painful.
Yeah.
It's extraordinarily painful, and we're grateful to you, Donya, for sharing these stories. And thank you also for traveling a long distance to come and talk to us today. And we look forward to talking to you again very soon, Donya. Please be safe in the meantime, and thank you. And we will see you again very, very soon. And give our best to all of your family.
Thank you, Donya.
Thank you so much.
Donya.
Please take care.
Everyone watch this stream.
Thank you.
Thank you, and see you again.
See you soon, Donya. I'm glad that worked finally.
Yeah, it's difficult to connect, but and Donya also travels a long distance to come and talk to us, and we really appreciate that. And the story she told, I hadn't heard that story about the family, two families. I don't want to say fighting, it's the word she used, over the remains. And this is an experience so many families are having. And our friend Asim al-Nabi, who we mentioned earlier, who is the spokesperson for the Gaza municipality and was also a student and a dear friend of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 wrote on his Twitter account, I think it was yesterday, that he and Ahmed 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜, who is Rifhat's son, had spent many hours trying to find where Rifhat was buried. And we know that he was buried, but, you know, in this landscape of destruction, of course, he would have been buried under very difficult circumstances without necessarily anyone keeping a record. We know that there were witnesses to his burial, but they don't know where. And that what Asim said underscores the importance for people of knowing what happened to their loved ones as part of the necessary process of being able to continue with life. And it's just incredibly painful and unfathomable.
Yeah. And we're going to continue to see so many stories come out like that.
Yeah. And the need to know, people want to know. They want
Yeah.
to know what, and the tragic thing is that many may never know, and that's just, it's just, and to me that's also the importance, to link back to our discussion with Dyab Abu Jahjah, the importance of justice, that these horrors cannot just be swept under the rug by, like the UN Secretary General tries to do with, like, oh, I pay tribute to all those who died. They didn't just die, they were murdered in a Holocaust.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks, Ali. Let's bring on Jon and talk about the resistance. The last few days of the ceasefire, before the ceasefire, and what's been going on since the ceasefire. Jon, what can you tell us?
Yeah, well, great show again. I hope that justice comes too. I think that the fact that so many of these soldiers left those crass digital footprints that they thought were so funny at the time will come back and haunt them for the rest of their lives for what they've done over these last 470 days. So it was great to hear from Dyab and that organization doing great work. So that was a great interview.
Yeah. So has there been resistance still in Gaza?
Well, what we have is resistance videos released after the ceasefire, particularly from Beit Hanun, also from Rafah. In Beit Hanun, the operations were under operational security for the 2.5 weeks at the end of the war. And Beit Hanun is the first place that Israel invaded. So this war began on the ground war, day 1, October 27th, began in Beit Hanun, and it ended its last minutes of the war, such as it is, should it hold, ended in Beit Hanun. So, and as you guys talked about, and Ali mentioned, there was government presence, resistance presence on the street immediately, after the ceasefire on Saturday. So
that's right.
We have that and a lot more to get into it. Should we get going?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we're going to start. The ceasefire went into effect on Sunday morning, local time. And as was mentioned, we did a special broadcast on Sunday. So if you haven't seen that, check that out. But this first video we showed on that day, and this is the handover video that 𝐤𝐿 released immediately after the ceasefire happened. This is the exchange of the first 3 prisoners, first 3 captives being released. But you can see in this video immediately 𝐤𝐿 in the streets. You can see Gaza City. This is downtown Gaza City. This was supposed to be destroyed. This group's not supposed to exist. These people are all supposed to be ethnically cleansed from the north, and none of that is true. And you can see it in this video clearly. This is the Red Cross delivering the first 3 captives and signing over their papers. So everything that you're going to see on this show has been published between last episode you saw us last Thursday the 16th and today is January 23rd. You can see him signing over there to the Red Cross the official certificates to match with the prisoners that were being exchanged. And of course, this deal has been on the table for more than a year. What we're seeing is the humanitarian release that could have happened in November 2023. This has been confirmed by everybody who is involved in the negotiations. The negotiations have not changed since that time. So there was no concessions made. Between November 23rd, the numbers of prisoners have only gone up in the exchange rate. As Abu Ubaidah said at the time, the number, when Israel said they were going to return to war in November 2023 and not continue with the humanitarian exchange, Abu Ubaidah made it clear that the price for the prisoners was going to go up. But the parameters of this deal have been in place since that time. So 1 year of genocide led to no surrender, led to no concessions, led to no change in the principles of the agreement from 𝐤𝐿. So if we look at number 2, you can see here, this is the signing over of the paper itself, which just says acknowledging the receipt of the Israeli prisoners, I, the representative of the Red Cross, received from the Qassam brigades. And this is not theater. This is signing over the documents. And these documents are critical because they match with the prisoner exchange deal that was made. And part of the concessions in these deals, part of the deal was that the Palestinians would not be rearrested. So these kind of documents, signing off on these documents, are not just theater. This is actually happening as protocol. Of course, there was also in these deals the female captives. They're civilians. They, according to Qassam, should have been released the day after October 7th. They weren't the target of the October 7th raid. They didn't intend to hold these civilians. They believed that they would be exchanged immediately. Jahjah Sinwar visited them on October 7th, on the morning of October 8th, and said they would be returning. Their guards said they would be returning immediately. These were not intended to be people part of a prisoner exchange 15 months later. That was Israel's decision to leave them and to carry on with a war. And Israel believed with its goals that through violence, they could return the prisoners. And that is not what happened. So the destruction of Gaza, the genocide, the crimes didn't change anything about this deal. And that's important to say. This is Jahjah Sinwar's deal that was originally negotiated. So I just wanted to show you that official signing off there. If we look at number 3, you can just see in the streets presence immediately of Qassam in the streets, and a bunch of them are holding Israeli weapons, captured Israeli weapons from soldiers either in this battle or in the 2014 battle. But they were the ones that those weapons are what Qassam brought out to the street to show. So I wanted to show you that. But as Ali pointed out, from the first minutes, all of this presence, the resistance presence, the government presence, the municipality presence in the streets was immediate, was total. It was never destroyed. It was never dismantled. The battalions of Qassam were not dismantled. We'll see that as we go through this program. And Hamas was immediately able to provide security on the aid routes for the influx of aid. The aid was not captured by Israeli-backed bandits. The aid was delivered to where it was supposed to be in large numbers. The deal calls for 600 trucks a day, and that happened in the first 3 days. There was 1,500 trucks across the border. 50 trucks are supposed to be fuel each day that should get up the paramedics, the hospitals, the civic infrastructure from that fuel. So that's a key part of the deal. And of course, the tents, 200,000 tents are supposed to come in these first days as well, which was also something stipulated in the agreement from the beginning. If we look at number 4 here, just to give you a sense, I always start with the map. So I want to keep this going so that people understand what we're talking about. The Netzarim corridor, we've spent 14 of the 15 months talking about the Netzarim corridor and what was going to happen with it. That's in the middle there, dividing northern Gaza from the south, and the other key corridor is the Philadelphia corridor along the Rafah border. The Netzarim corridor has already begun to be dismantled. It has to be dismantled by day 7. Along the coastal road. So that should be happening by Saturday. Today's Thursday. So within the next 2 days, the coastal road should be open. And there's a full military withdrawal of Israeli forces from Rafah, where they were operating from Jabalia Camp, Beit Lahia, and Beit Hanun. That's where the Israelis were operating. Those troops have left. And so that's significant. And on Saturday, there'll be 4 women soldiers, 4 IDF soldiers, Israeli military soldiers that will be released, and their exchange rate is 50-1. And they are for life sentences and for long sentences. And I just want to point this out. I pointed it out on the show on Sunday, but 𝐄𝐿 fights as a joint operations. They fought as a national movement. They represent a national army. And in the prisoner exchange, that's how they represent the prisoner exchange too. So there's 735 in phase one of this deal, 735 political and security prisoners that will be released. Israel calls them security prisoners. We'd call them political prisoners. And the breakdown of those 735 is 345 𝐶aM and Hamas members, 229 Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades and Fatah members, 67 Islamic Jihad Saraya al-Quds members, 19 DFLP Abu Ali Mustafa Brigades members, and 6 DFLP National Resistance Brigades members. So the release is not for Hamas only. They're not. They're all focused on a national project, and that was how they fought. I brought your attention to that numerous times over this 15 months. And when you see the actual documents and who it is that exits prison in these exchanges, you see that national representation as well, because in prison, they're in a national movement in the prisons. They work together in their groups in the prisons. But the understanding of the hierarchy of who was going to be released, the deans of the prisoners, the people with the longest sentences, those people are prioritized in the release based on the national movement. So if we just zoom in here, this next map here, number 5, is what it looks like in Gaza today. So that's the overall map, and this is from a different angle, but you can see this is the IDF's map showing the buffer zone and the Netzarim corridor, and then on the far left of the screen you have the Philadelphia corridor. So this is how things look as of today. There's a buffer zone of 700 meters around Gaza, and the Netzarim corridor is being in the process of being pulled up. I'll show you maps on those a little later, but these are the maps as they are today. So we will follow this whole ceasefire and prisoner exchange because there's many elements to it. They are interwoven, and they all build on each other. So phase 1 is 33 humanitarian, it's called, release. These were the people that it could have been released in November in the humanitarian release, but Israel chose not to. Phase 2 is the soldiers, and there are 67 of those, or in that category, soldiers, reservists, in that next category, and that's when things start to get a little less clear than they are in stage 1. If we look at map number 6, we can zoom in on Rafah with a Philadelphia corridor here. As Donya talked about, people immediately went back to Rafah on the first day of the ceasefire. Let's do number 7. Number 7 will show the Philadelphia corridor map, the basics. So you can see there, we were talking about the Philadelphia corridor and how wide it had gotten over the course of the war. And once Netanyahu in the summer prioritized the Philadelphia corridor over all other aspects of the exchange, we were talking about how wide the corridor is. Here it is 700 meters, and in the bottom 1,100 meters. Israel's allowed 3 positions in the south that are 1,100 meter buffer zones, and the rest is 700 meter buffer zones. Right now, everything that's crossing into Gaza is crossing through the Kerem Shalom crossing in the bottom corner of that map that you can see. And then the next one up is the Rafah crossing. And ultimately the Rafah crossing, that is the one that goes to Egypt. Kerem Shalom goes to Israel and Egypt, but Egypt through Israel. And so the key is getting the Rafah crossing open, because the Rafah crossing is where wounded patients who need to seek medical care outside of Gaza will be released through Rafah. And that process is a little bit less known. The withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor doesn't happen until the end of the 42 days. Phase 1 is 42 days, and the Philadelphia corridor is supposed to be abandoned between day 42 and day 50. So it is in an ambiguous period that still needs to be negotiated on. Phase 2 will be begun to be negotiated on February 16th is when that begins to be negotiated. The rest is for phase 1 that we're seeing right now. And this week, 𝐬𝐿 released an operation, a significant operation that happened in Rafah. If we look at number 7C, we can see, do we have the first from the municipality map? Sorry, my bad. This is the municipality map, just to show how the government is able to immediately respond to the situation and provide a map for people returning to Rafah, where the danger zones are, how thick the corridor, the Philadelphia corridor is, and where areas that you cannot go are. This is the Gaza government, the Gaza municipality, the Rafah municipality in this case, immediately able to respond to the moment of the ceasefire with a map that's updated to give to people. So there's no collapse of the government. There's no collapse of the resistance. This is not going to be a surprise to anyone who's been following our program for the last 15 months, but this is seeing it for your own eyes. This is what people in Rafah were given when they arrived back to Rafah. So Rafah municipality operating just like they are in Gaza City and in each of the cities throughout Gaza. So good. I wanted to get that one in. I almost skipped it. But 7C, this is 𝐬𝐿 operation in Al-Shabura camp that was released. This is an operation from January 13th. So this video came out after the ceasefire, but this operation takes place in the week preceding. You can see 𝐬𝐿 has eyes on an Israeli position in Shabura camp. The Israelis have basically destroyed the entire camp, as you can see, except for the one building, more or less the only building standing. And the Palestinians here, 𝐬𝐿 is using the tunnel to scope, to reconnaissance this building. There's the classic Israeli blanket hanging in the one window where the soldiers are using it, which is their adaptation from soldiers in a window, is to put massive conspicuous blankets into the window that they are. We're watching 3 teams here setting about with their 𝐬𝐿 built thermobaric warheads. They're PG-7BR thermobaric warheads, which are uniquely Gazan, made in the case of the Yasin 105 with a precursor charge that you're going to see how they work here. First unit, so there's 3 squads here. First team is going to go to an elevated firing position. Second unit here and the third unit are accessing the attack site through a tunnel. So they've been able to surveil their position continuously using tunnels throughout the war. This is days before the last day of the war, and they're still able to operate in their tunnels. That's how they've been able to fight this war through the whole time. So this unit's going to come out at ground level. So we're going to have 2 shooters, 1 tunnel-borne, 1 ground level, 1 elevated, firing on this Israeli troop position that the 𝐬𝐿 field report from January 13th said there was 25 troops using this position. And we saw the armored vehicles around it. And so we're seeing here a triple thermobaric ambush on a single building, which I'm not sure we've seen 3 hits on a single building in the war. So this operation was a significant operation right at the end of the war. The ability of the Rafah Brigade to fight till the end of the war, despite the fact that Netanyahu said they were dismantled and defeated in July, when he was talking about the Philadelphia corridor as being the oxygen for the resistance, which it is not. It may have been decades ago, but it is not anymore, because you can see that thermobaric warhead right there was built in Gaza. That weapon that's being used against the Israelis did not come through the Philadelphia corridor. It was built in Gaza, and that's why they've been able to fight with these weapons throughout the war. So now you're seeing the elevated shot. And the thermobaric warhead is a fuel air ignition, and it's used as an anti-personnel weapon, because you can see it just fills the room with a flame. It's a deadly it's a destructive weapon that's being used here. And we're seeing 3 of them being used on a unit of 25. The Israelis did not claim casualties in Rafah on this day, which has been something we have seen throughout the war. This is a gunfight going on. We don't have audio audio track is not in there, but there's a gunfight going on. Then these fighters are back underground in the tunnel. They have already rigged up a minefield of IEDs, and they're waiting underground for the reinforcements. The two Namur, they describe it in the field report, two Namur troop carriers. We don't see it here, but that makes sense because they have a 25-man unit in this building. So they're sending rescue operations to Namur troop carriers, and they detonate the minefield underneath it. So a significant operation in Rafah on the final days of the war, 6 months after the Israelis said that they were defeated in Rafah. So obviously absurd claims that we've seen throughout the war and we've been tracking throughout the war. The reason why it can take a few days for a video to be published out of Rafah, there's many operational factors that could lead to it. And we've seen that before. We saw it in Jahjah during the second Jahjah invasion. 𝐄𝐥𝐿 kept all of the videos and communications from Jahjah until the withdrawal happened. And we're going to see that later on the show, also in Beit Hanun. So let's take a look at the Netzarim corridor, where Israel has been for 5 days now pulling up bases on the western coast, on the Al-Rashid coastal road. They've been pulling up their bases that were always temporary bases. We followed this from the beginning. I remember more than a year ago, it was in November, we started talking about the Netzarim corridor and what Israel was doing. This was a logical place for Israel to attempt to cut the Gaza Strip into fingers. It was a long-term plan that goes back to the beginning of the occupation of Gaza in the early 1970s. And it was an area where they used to have a settlement that was in the middle of Gaza, specifically to cut Gaza in half. So the ability for the Israelis to take the Netzarim corridor was never a major military accomplishment. Holding it wasn't a military accomplishment either, because as you can see, the cities are a distance away from it. And even though they destroyed and widened the corridor, holding the corridor was not a military accomplishment. Keeping the corridor forever may have been, but that's not what's happening here. And this agreement stipulates that Israelis are not getting their soldiers back. They're not getting their people back if they're in the Netzarim corridor. If we look at the next map, you can see a bit better what I'm talking about. So that's what this is going to look like by Saturday. The coastal road is going to be completely open, Al-Rashid Street. People will be able to walk on foot from the south to the north, which was a key stipulation, a key principle of the negotiations led by Yahya Sinwar and Khalil al-Hayya right from the beginning. And Hamas's conditions were an end to the aggression, a withdrawal from the corridors, and a return home, a return to the north. People must be allowed to return home. And the fact that they're not being inspected and they don't have to go through a checkpoint on the coastal road is also a victory for 𝐶𝐿 in these negotiations. Israel wanted to turn Israel didn't want to let people return to the north, but then when they did allow people to return, they wanted to do it through a massive checkpoint that they had set up in the Netzarim corridor that I reported on back a year ago, that they were setting that up. That installation has been removed, and people are not being inspected. And anytime the reason why people don't want checkpoints, which is, I mean, it's obvious why people don't want checkpoints, but the reason why they don't want checkpoints is that that's where you're captured. That's where Israel can capture people. Obviously, as we've seen throughout the war, random people, and you could be taken away and disappeared and taken into torture camps in the south of Israel, as more than 1,200 Palestinians were taken out of Gaza, who are being released also in this first stage in the humanitarian release. 735 security prisoners and 1,200 Gazans who were detained after October 8th and had no charges against them, no had no charges against them. They were just taken from Gaza as bargaining chips and tortured in Sidi Taman and these terrible camps in the south of Israel. So to not have a checkpoint, that's a serious victory also for Palestinians. What you see on the right-hand side there, that's how this will be until day 22. Day 22, the Salahuddin Street will be open, which is the main highway that runs north-south in Gaza. And that's what you can see on your map there. Israel sets up a checkpoint 1,100 meters in from the fence. It's not a border, but in from the fence that demarcates the edge of Gaza. And there are going to be searches that are not done by the Israelis. Cars traveling on this road, cars will be allowed to travel on this road, on Salahuddin, and they will be inspected by a third party. It's still being worked out right now between the UAE and Egypt and possibly American private security companies. We'll keep reporting on that because that has not been finalized. But that gives you an idea of what's going on with the Netzarim corridor. It's already, as of Saturday, will be half empty and people will be walking from the south to the north. And that will be a very celebratory day for Palestinians who were driven from their homes. And the ability to return to their homes is a principle that was not given up by 𝐤𝐿, not in any amount of genocide, in any amount of destruction. Those tenets stayed firm, and that's going to be something that history reflects very positively on 𝐤𝐿 and leading these negotiations to not waver on their principles. And also a serious defeat by Israel, whose objectives were to return the captives through violence and pressure, to destroy 𝐤𝐿, and to destroy the Hamas government. That was the third. And the fourth was Gaza would no longer be a threat to Israel, which is obviously not the case. Very much Gaza is a threat to Israel. You have thousands of angry young men who have watched their fighters defend their territory heroically and want to join 𝐤𝐿. We know that American intelligence estimates have 𝐤𝐿 being larger today than before the war started. I don't doubt that. And in the coming months and years, that will grow even more. So Gaza is a threat. Gaza believes that they can win the war. They believe they can go through the most brutal hell on earth and come out the other side without ever having given any concessions to the Israelis. And that's something that will leave Gaza a threat to Israel going forward. So Israel failed on all four of its principal goals, and the Palestinians succeeded on all four of their principal goals. Netzarim corridor is a good example of that. Let's look at number 10, because the entire time Netzarim corridor was under attack. This is happening. This is an operation from Tel El-Hawa. Tel El-Hawa is in the southwest of Gaza City. I lived in it for a while in Tel El-Hawa, so shout out to Tel El-Hawa here. These fighters are planting IEDs, improvised explosive devices. They're not really improvised. It's kind of a misnomer at this point, but you could see them planting those with pressure plates, which means they don't have to detonate them by hand. When the weight of the armored vehicle passes over, you can see there the Merkava tank. When it passes over there, it sets off the charge underneath, as it did there, blowing away camera 2. And we're going to see it from camera 3 here, because they have 4 cameras on this, 4 spotters on this operation. There's the tank burning from camera 3, from spotter number 3. So these operations, when the Israelis were in the Netzarim corridor, in the expanded Netzarim corridor, they're being hit. They're pointing there to pieces of a vehicle. Not clear if it's the targeted vehicle. They identify it as the targeted vehicle, but ruins of Israeli armored vehicles, which we are starting to see all over Gaza, and we will especially see in the north when people return full on to the north. Remnants of destroyed Israeli armored vehicles that we've been documenting for the last 15 months. Abu Ubaidah talked about 2,000 targeted vehicles, which I think is a conservative number. 𝐤𝐿's numbers are rarely, if ever, inflated, even on the smallest field report. So And that's something we've pointed out too all throughout the war. So number 11 is a sniper operation. This is also in the Netzarim corridor. This made the corridor difficult for the Israelis to operate in. It was the reason why they had to continue widening it to protect their soldiers. Again, we've edited this video so that it matches community guidelines at YouTube, which we always do. We did that for the prisoner exchange as well. I edited out the prisoners being exchanged, which is, I think, proper. We in the Israeli media, they put the captives, both Palestinian and their own captives, they put them all over the media, and I think that's not the best principles. I think international law principles for one thing, but just basic decency, we're not going to do that. So as long as the YouTube community guideline censors that are watching this right now know that we've edited this video to match your guidelines. So let's move to the north. The Netzarim corridor under attack, constantly shrinking. People soon going to be moving north. The next time you see us, we will be reporting on people moving north. And the end of the war was it was marked by 100-day siege of Jabalia, where 5,000 people were killed, 9,500 were wounded, 2,600 were detained for some point. We watched them dismantle all 3 hospitals and attack Kamal Adwan and Beit Lahia. But the Gavadi Brigade and the Nahal Brigade both exited Gaza on Monday. They left out through the border exits through the northeast side of Beit Hanun, and they had to speak in the media about their failures in Beit Hanun. The IDF said, "We are not faltering in Beit Hanun," because they took so many casualties, at least 15 casualties in the final week of the war alone, and the numbers are almost certainly an undercount because the numbers of wounded were scores each day. One day there was 30 wounded. And so I think this is another example of Israel underselling their numbers, and I'm going to show you some of the Qassam operations there. But the Israeli military said that we are not faltering in Beit Hanun because they were getting hit so hard. They said, "We are cleansing the area thoroughly, this time once and for all." And of course, 3 days later, the ceasefire came in. So they didn't cleanse once and for all Beit Hanun. They didn't cleanse the north. None of their genocidal plans came to fruition. And they came because of the resistance in the north. If we look at number 12A, we have here Abu Hamza Fayed. He is the commander of the Beit Hanun battalion, and he went out and met people and who were coming back to their destroyed homes. And he gives an address where he says that Israel failed to achieve in its military goals because it didn't achieve its objectives, and that is a defeat in the truest sense in both military and non-military principles, he says. We saw Gaza emerge dignified and defiant. In victory, he said, walking to those people. So the interesting thing about Abu Hamza obviously led the fight in Beit Hanun heroically for these 15 months. But if we look at the next slide here, 12C, Israel told us in May that they had assassinated him, and not just assassinated him. They claimed in May during the second invasion of Jabalia, that their underground Yahalom, under their tunnel unit, their special forces unit, killed him in a tunnel, in combat in a tunnel. That was during the May operation. Here's what they said. The IDF said, the commander of Hamas's Beit Hanun battalion was killed by Israeli forces in a tunnel in the Jabalia area, the military says. Hassan Fayed, Abu Hamza, was responsible for many anti-tank missile attacks launched against our troops during the war. the troops that were in their neighborhood during the war, as well as launching artillery at the Gaza envelopes, the IDF said in a statement. The IDF says that Fayed was killed in a tunnel in a joint operation carried out by the 98th Division and Special Forces of the Air Force and Elite Yahalom Combat Engineering Unit. His killing is, quote, part of the 98th Division's fighting above and below ground to find and destroy tunnel networks and eliminate terrorists, the military said. So, not true. Didn't happen. Completely faked story. And this is also, interestingly, the part of the story that, if people remember back in May, Abu Ubaidah came out in the middle of the night and gave a speech saying that we, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 had captured a soldier in a tunnel underground that we had lured there. So 𝐓𝐡𝐞 lured these IDF forces to a tunnel by leaking information that there was bodies of captives in this tunnel. And they went down in this tunnel and fought, and one of the soldiers was seen on camera being dragged into the tunnel. We still haven't seen maybe we'll see that person be released, because there's video of him and we will be able to identify who he was. So we'll stay on that story. But because of that perceived failure of the video coming out with one of their soldiers being dragged into the tunnel, and one of the first, if not the only, time where there was actual combat in the tunnels that Israel claimed combat in the tunnels, it's clearly a fake story, because it's not Abu Hamza, and Abu Hamza was not in Jabalia. He fights in Beit Hanun, and the Beit Hanun battalion stayed in Beit Hanun, which is how we know that these operations were able to take place. If we look at number 13, this is fighting in territorial units is how 𝐓𝐡𝐞 survived this entire war, and how you know that they were never defeated, that they were never dismantled. They were not guerrilla forces running around harassing Israeli troops. They were fighting in their territorial battalions. This is the Beit Hanun battalion, who released yesterday all the operations that they didn't release during the last 2 weeks of the war. When the death toll that we got from the last 2 weeks of the war was strictly from the Israelis. We didn't have field reports from 𝐓𝐡𝐞 saying that what the operations were. Well, we got those reports yesterday. And just to give you a summary, there was 6 Al Ghul sniper operations. There was 11 thermobaric warheads versus troop positions. So like we saw in Rafah, there was 11 operations like that. There was 4 IEDs versus tanks. And one of the incidents separated the turret from the hull of the tank. And that was known in the Israeli media as well. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 confirmed that in their field report. There was 3 IEDs versus command jeeps. That sign says there, that's the ambushes of death, and it's a series. So it said, stay tuned, because they're going to show us the rest of these operations. But this, to give you an overview of them. So there was 3 IEDs versus command jeeps, and the Israelis were vexed by that, because their jeeps were getting hit in convoys, in multi-vehicle convoys, where the IED was detonated against the command vehicle, not against any other vehicle except the command vehicle. So the Israelis, in their internal reports, army radio and whatnot, was saying, how do they do this? How do they know? How do they keep knowing to hit the command jeeps? And I read these testimonies from before, but just to give you a briefing on it, an embed from Channel 12 got testimony from the soldiers who said, in Beit Hanun, who said, we are fighting in an environment monitored by cameras by the militants. They've planted explosive devices in every alley and are activating them from inside the tunnels. The underground network is fully operational. We cannot see them with the naked eye. For a week and a half, there's been no direct identification of any militants while we're getting hit. They have completely planted Beit Hanun with huge amounts of explosives and remnants of our Air Force bombs. Every alley, every intersection is filled with state-of-the-art cameras, 360-degree thermal cameras, and just the soldiers wigging out because they don't understand why, after all this time, Beit Hanun is rising up on the last days of the war and smoking them and dealing with them in a way that looks like the first day of the war. So there was 3 command jeeps. There was IEDs versus 3 booby trap troop positions, 3, 2 operations with IEDs versus D9s, Yassins versus 2 vehicles, and rockets and artillery on 11 straight days. So these operations, when they say on that sign that you see, on that graphic that you see on the screen saying coming soon, we're going to hear about these operations. So maybe I'll save them till we watch the video, but they match with the Israeli reports pretty well. Like on the 8th, in a combined operation in Beit Hanun, northern Gaza, Al-Qassam fighters sniped and killed an Israeli sniper and his spotter. Subsequently, they targeted the same force with 5 thermobaric anti-personnel shells, causing significant casualties. The enemy acknowledged the death of 2 soldiers and the injury of 10 others. And there's just a whole page of these reports that I think we're going to see videos of many of these. On the 8th, Al-Qassam fighters set up a well-prepared ambush along a predicted enemy route, destroying a tank commanded by an armored battalion officer with a high explosive IED, causing the turret to detach and killing all inside, including the officer. They then targeted the reinforcements that came with an anti-personnel IED, inflicting further casualties in the minefield. And these are the reports that the Israelis were claiming: 5, 6 killed, and 10, 15, 20, and like I said, one day 30 casualties. So these reports will match them up when these videos come out, presumably next week. But interesting story from Beit Hanun. And like I said, this is not unusual to have these reports come out after for operational reasons. They don't want to risk doing it, sending them out in the moment of the battle. Number 14 is also to show that 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐄𝐿 was in here in Beit Hanun as well. It's not just Qassam. This is 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐄𝐿 operating in Beit Hanun with their Qassam rockets, their 10-kilometer Grad rockets that say made in Palestine. This is 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐄𝐿's. Beit Hanun is Qassam city, named after these rockets, because this is where the area where they're launched from over the past 20 years. At Israeli settlements in the envelope and military bases like the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 military base that's right on the Gaza border. The 𝐓𝐡𝐞 military base is the target of this operation that we're looking at here. And on October 7th, people may remember hearing about 𝐓𝐡𝐞. That was the place where frogmen commandos, naval-born commandos from Qassam, landed on the beach and stormed the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 military base and took prisoners who will be exchanged in phase 2 of the release, should that go ahead. So interesting developments showing these videos after the ceasefire, but really paint a picture of why the Israelis were so upset about their failure in Beit Hanun, and to show the commander of the Beit Hanun battalion, who they said they killed 6 months ago. We didn't say he was killed. There was no confirmation he was killed. The fighters didn't say he was killed. Qassam didn't say he was killed. Fighters referred to him during battle, as well as the Beit Lahia commander, Wael Rajab. They both were spoken of, so we didn't think that they were dead. But to see him come out and give that speech yesterday was embarrassing, as the Israeli media reported it. And just one final note from the resistance report. As part of the prisoner exchange between Hamas and Israel, the Ansar Allah group has released the crew of the Galaxy leadership that was boarded and captured by them and the Yemeni armed forces early in the war as part of the blockade of Israel, of shipping to Israel. They mostly Filipino crew. They got gift bags too, like the Qassam prisoners. They got Yemeni jewelry and other souvenirs from their hosts, and they were sent out on a chartered flight by Oman, who negotiated the deal as part of the ceasefire. and prisoner exchange deal. And Ansar Allah said that they will continue their blockade on Israeli shipping through the Bab el-Mandab until the blockade of Gaza ends. So the blockade of Gaza is supposed to end in phase 3 of the prisoner exchange and ceasefire deal. We'll see if we get that far. Netanyahu has promised that we won't get that far. Maybe we'll talk about that in the group discussion. That is the resistance report for this week, the first week of the ceasefire.
Thank you so much, John. Before we get into more of what else is happening, in the context of the ceasefire and new Trump administration, we all saw Steve Witkoff, who was instrumental in going and telling Netanyahu to, sign the deal that had been on the table for a year, which he did, and now there's an indication that Steve Witkoff is actually going to go to the Netzarim corridor to oversee the implementation of these ceasefire terms over the next few days. Can you talk a little bit more about that and why it's significant?
Yeah, well, that's what he said. He said that he's going to go to the Netzarim corridor, to that map that I showed you on the Salahadin Road, and he's going to inspect cars that are going north. That's what he said. He's mentioned a few times that he's going to go to Gaza. I'll believe it when I see it. It'd be interesting if that's true. But he's very gung-ho about the ceasefire, and it's very interesting because his statements, they don't match Netanyahu's statements. They don't sound like they were in the same meetings together, because Netanyahu believes that he got guarantees from Trump that he is able to resume the war, that this is a temporary ceasefire. They're trying to get back as many of their captives as they can, which will only be phase 1 because phase 2 hasn't been negotiated, and that's for soldiers. And the soldiers are going to be a very high price, and they're not going to be an easy exchange. Whereas this part, phase 1, is the humanitarian exchange that is an easier exchange to make. So Netanyahu, the understanding in Israel is that Netanyahu believes that he can go back to war and that he got that guarantee from Witkoff and Trump, and he got the weapons to do it too, because there was some weapon shipments that were sort of being blocked by Biden at the end. A couple large shipments of D9 Caterpillar bulldozers were being not blocked, but delayed, red taped a little bit. And Netanyahu claims that he got from Witkoff a guarantee from Trump to get those weapons and to return to war. Witkoff doesn't say it that way. He says he's committed to all 3 phases of the ceasefire. And his way of saying that, as proof of that, he's literally going to go inspect cars in the Netzarim corridor, which would be remarkable.
Yeah.
And we did mention that in a special broadcast on Sunday, which I highly recommend to people if you haven't seen it. And of course, you'll find it on the YouTube channel. But Witkoff's comments, he made some other comments this week that I want to briefly mention. But there have been some doubts about the ceasefire because of a comment that Trump made, and I think we can watch that video. Let's take a quick look.
President, that you can keep the ceasefire in Gaza and conclude the 3 phases of this deal?
I'm not confident. That's not our war, it's their war, but I'm not confident, but I think they're very weakened on the other side.
Do you support the 2 states?
Gaza, boy, I looked at a picture of Gaza. Gaza is like a massive demolition site. That place it's really got to be rebuilt in a different way.
Do you plan to help rebuilding Gaza?
I might. Gaza is interesting. It's a phenomenal location. On the sea, best weather. Everything's good. It's like some beautiful things could be done with it, but it's very interesting. But some fantastic things could be done with Gaza.
How do you see the future in governance for Gaza?
Well, it depends. I can't imagine you could have, well, you certainly can't have the people that were there. Most of them are dead.
So yeah, just to reiterate that, he says multiple times, I am not confident to that question, the question from the press corps saying, will the ceasefire hold? Trump says, I'm not confident. I'm not confident twice in a row. And then 𝐓𝐿𝐿 was on Fox News, I believe it was yesterday, and they asked him about that. And 𝐓𝐿𝐿 said he doesn't disagree with Trump. So there's sort of two things going on here that don't match. That the meetings between 𝐓𝐿𝐿 and Netanyahu don't match. The gung-ho nature of 𝐓𝐿𝐿 saying he thinks all three phases of this deal will happen don't seem to match his boss's confidence. So, yeah.
Well, but
the statements
Trump
of Israeli officials they're known to like essentially make things up. You know, they are trying to impose their will. You know, that seems to me to be the reality of it, and they're trying to talk certain things into existence. I think a lot remains to be seen about the reality of what's going to happen.
And of course, remember that when we, in our discussion on Sunday, we talked about that NBC story, which quoted an unnamed Trump official saying, look, it's not just Hamas that could destroy this, it's Israel as well. Israel is trying to, they basically said Israel is more likely, I mean, that's how I interpret it, to try to destroy the ceasefire. So that could be what they're signaling to here. I know people are going to say, Ali, you're being too optimistic, but I am trying to read the tea leaves here. And I want them to be committed to the ceasefire. I mean, I'm not trying to kid myself, but they put a lot of capital into getting it. Why would they not want it to work? And why would 𝐓𝐿𝐿 go out on a limb and say he's committed to these three phases? The other thing that Trump said that was interesting there, he said, it's not our war, it's their war. And that's very interesting phrasing, because think about how think about how Joe Biden presented this as, we and Israel are fighting shoulder to shoulder. We'll do anything for Israel. And Netanyahu in Congress and in many statements has said, we are fighting for you. We're fighting on the front lines of Western civilization against savagery. And one interpretation of Trump's comments is to say, no, it's not our war. And you can go back to war if you want to, but the implication there is don't expect us to pay for it. Now, that's my rosiest interpretation of Trump's comments. As for his comments about Gaza being we could do beautiful things there, that's fine. This is a real estate guy. He builds resorts, he builds casinos. That's what he became famous for. He can make whatever plans he wants, but he's going to have to get them past the Qassam Brigade's zoning committee. And no one has been able to do that. So again, don't get carried away with, Trump wants to do this and Jared Kushner wants to do that. And well, fine, but you got to get the permission of the Qassam Brigades, and that hasn't gone well for them.
Exactly. No. This is the reality. Like, I've seen a lot of activists in recent days and recent weeks say things like, there is no ceasefire, put a ceasefire in scare quotes and say, the so-called ceasefire, etc., etc. Now, look, I understand why people are skeptical, like, to say the least. Like, we cannot trust Israel's intentions. And when you see, and we haven't really had time to get into it on this week's live stream, but when you see what's been happening in the West Bank, the escalation of Israeli crimes in the West Bank, rounding up people, in Jenin and in other places in the West Bank, it's understandable that people are skeptical about the ceasefire, but you've got to keep things in perspective. Israel always does what it wants. Israel always carries out massacres and killings. And in a way, there's been no ceasefire for 100 years. That's the reality of it. But what happened in Gaza was not nothing. This ceasefire is not nothing. We've seen people's celebrations in Gaza, and they're not, doing that to be gung-ho. There's a reason for that. There has been a substantive difference to what Israel is doing. And, Jon has just covered in detail of how the Israeli troops are withdrawing. So, this is a real thing. We should keep it in perspective, while at the same time obviously being skeptical and monitoring it closely. And I think these political developments are really, really significant. We can't, again, like I said on the special live stream on the weekend, I can't think of anything this politically significant from an American administration in terms of its how it relates to the Israelis since the George H.W. Bush era, where there was, talk of sanctions and so forth.
Well, they're not getting their prisoners back. So the phase 2 is the soldiers. So if Israel has other plans for the ceasefire, they're not getting their soldiers back.
Exactly.
That's not going to happen. And the way the deal has been structured is because Qassam knows that Israel just wants to get its people back, and then it will renege on everything that has been agreed to. So the way that this has been built is to prevent that. So the negotiations start on February 16th for the second phase, and that's when things will really see how serious Trump and Netanyahu are about the ceasefire, because that will be when they make the decision to either abandon their soldiers and return to war. And they've known for the last 15 months that the terms don't change. Qassam's terms don't change. They'll only increase. So that's the significance of the second part of the exchanges. It's the soldiers.
And one other little tidbit on this, Tamara, if you could put up that article I just sent to you. This is from antiwar.com, but it's quoting comments in other media that Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, said Wednesday that it was good that Hamas was open to talks with the United States. Witkoff was asked in an interview with Fox News about comments from Musa Abu Marzouk, a Hamas official based in Qatar, quote, "We're prepared for a dialogue with America and achieving understandings on everything," Abu Marzouk said, according to the New York Times. In response, Witkoff said, "Well, I think it's good if it's accurate. I think we were able to demonstrate that President Trump's policies, peace through strength, they work. Everybody listens." Again, that's very odd, because you can't imagine anyone in the Biden administration even entertaining the idea of talking to
Not
Hamas.
in a million years, never.
Yeah, so what it means, I don't know, but it's we need to just be aware these things are happening and not pretend that they're not happening. What they mean,
exactly.
we'll
we have
see.
to deal with objective reality here. Like, this headline alone, this quote alone, is hugely, hugely significant. Okay, let's just say it comes to nothing. Let's just say it's all a lie. Even the fact that it's being said is massive, because he's just raising the prospects of the United States negotiating with Hamas, which is they've outlawed as a terrorist organization in their phrase. Again, this is potentially a hugely significant political move. Not move, but indication, let's say. It's huge. It goes back to the days of when the United States was negotiating with the PLO, the PLO was outlawed, and the Palestine Liberation Organization, as it was under Yasser Arafat back in the days, and it was against the law to negotiate with the PLO until it was impossible until it's done, as Nelson Mandela was famously said. So it looks impossible at the moment the United States or Britain or any other Western country would negotiate with Hamas, but directly. But again, it always looks impossible till it's done. And again, maybe this will come to nothing. But just the fact that there is this kind of talk is in and of itself highly significant, and it does feel like it's kind of being largely ignored at the moment.
Well, we're going to keep following that. Ali, you had something that was kind of bothering you this week.
Bothering me a lot. I don't know.
Bothering you a lot.
Some people might get mad at me for this, but that's what we're here for.
That's what we do.
Yeah,
it's our platform.
So let's get into it. Of course, probably a lot of people have seen the video of Episcopal Bishop of Washington, Marianne Budde, speaking in front of President Donald Trump at the National Cathedral in Washington, and she's being called a hero for doing it. Let's take a little clip of what she had to say to remind ourselves.
I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were all once strangers in this land. May God grant us the strength and courage to honor the dignity of every human being, to speak the truth to one another in love, and walk humbly with each other and our God for the good of all people in this nation and the world. Amen.
All right, so break this down for us and who this bishop is.
Well, it's hard to disagree what she said. She's the Episcopal or Anglican Bishop of Washington, and she's being, as I said, hailed across the country for her courage to confront Trump to his face. Let's take a look at this headline in the New York Times, for example, which is fairly typical of what we're seeing. And it says there, the bishop who pleaded with Trump, was anyone going to say anything? And the head and the subhead there, Bishop Budde locked eyes with President Trump and made a plea for mercy. And the war over spiritual authority in America was ignited anew. And there's this quote from her. It says, I had a feeling that there were people watching what was happening and wondering, was anyone going to say anything? She explained quietly in an interview on Tuesday night, was anyone going to say anything about the turn the country is taking? So that's what she said. But what have we just come out of? 15 months of Joe Biden's Holocaust in Gaza. I don't feel that the country is taking, it might be taking a different turn, but not a worse turn when you're coming out of a Holocaust. And I was curious whether Bishop Budde had spoken up about this Holocaust. And in fact, she has spoken about Gaza just a few days after October 7th, 2023, which is, of course, the day of the Al-Aqsa flood operation. But what she did was she used the occasion to amplify Israel's atrocity propaganda that was used to justify the genocide. And we can see her statement here that was published at the website of the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. And she states, quote, this is just one sentence from it, the capture and rape of civilian hostages, the slaughter of parents and children, the wanton and unprovoked carnage unleashed against the citizens of Israel is evil, and we must condemn it, end quote. As regular viewers and readers of the Electronic Intifada know, there's absolutely no evidence of rapes on October 7th to this day, and we reported on that again very recently. But Budde did not wait for any evidence to make those claims. I think we have our recent story that we can show just to remind people of our recent reporting on this. There you go. Israel still can't find any 7 October rape victims, prosecutor admits, and that was just earlier this month. Bishop Budde is generous enough to say, quote, the vast majority of Palestinians living in Gaza are not terrorists, and half are children who have known nothing but war for their entire lives. Israel's response must protect the innocent. Even as terrorists purposely target civilians, democracies must yield to the humanitarian mandate to protect the innocent and the most vulnerable, end quote. So you can see that what she's doing there is endorsing Israel's description of Palestinians who exercise their right to resist as terrorists, and endorsing Israel's military attack on Gaza, albeit couched in a call to, quote, protect the innocent, unquote. And of course, she calls Israel a democracy there. And several times in that statement, she cites Elie Wiesel, a complete moral fraud and fanatical Zionist who repeatedly endorsed Israeli violence and the repression against Palestinians. And here, without going on too much of a tangent, I really want to recommend Max Blumenthal's landmark article on what a fraud Elie Wiesel was. And this article was published in 2016, just after Wiesel died. And you can see the tagline from that. Officially remembered as a moral giant, Wiesel provided cover to the invasions and occupations that have devastated the Middle East. And there's no occupation Wiesel supported more than Israel's. But he does use Wiesel again to justify violence against Palestinians. Now, she did take part in a prayer vigil outside the White House on the 20th of November, 2023, where she gave a prayer. And let's watch a bit of that video.
There are children now, Palestinian and Israeli, who are terrified and suffering, hungry and wounded. There are men and women now who are doing all they can to keep their beloved ones alive. And there are men and women now persuaded that the only way forward is through violence. We pray that all those held hostage and unjustly in prison may be freed. We pray for all the bombing and the killing to stop, for aid to reach those in greatest need. We pray for lasting peace. We pray for the peacemakers.
So you can see the White House right behind Bishop Buddy as she's speaking, but at no time in her prayer, that was just a clip of it, but I did watch the whole thing. At no time in her prayer does she ask Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the administration occupying the White House right behind her as she spoke, at no time does she ask them to have mercy on the children of Gaza the way she asked Donald Trump to have mercy. At no time does she ask Joe Biden to stop sending the bombs that are tearing children apart. All it amounts to is both sidesy platitudes about how much everyone loves peace and, oh, we wish it would all stop, but never actually demanding that those who are doing it stop it. Now, Buddy did speak again on this subject, but apparently she waited until March 21st of 2024. At this point, tens of thousands of people had already been murdered and almost 2 million people displaced in Gaza. And after the ICJ had already declared Israel's attack on Gaza a plausible genocide, and after dozens of international law experts, including Holocaust scholars, some of them from Israel, had declared it a genocide. And here's what she tells us in that statement, which I think we can put on the screen as well. Quote, like many Christian leaders, I have remained largely silent on the war between Israel and Hamas after an initial condemnation of the brutality of Hamas's attacks on October 7th and a plea for a measured retaliatory response for the sake of innocent Palestinians. I have refrained from public statements. So how brave it is to tell us how silent you've been, except for condemning Palestinians and calling for retaliation against them. And then she goes through a litany of excuses for her silence, including her own ignorance, which did not stop her from spreading Israel's atrocity propaganda right after October 7th, and then remaining silent while it was used to justify a Holocaust. Now, this statement reads to me like an effort simply to cover her behind for her cowardice, but it's not much better than the October 7th statement. And she says in this March statement, quote, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Palestinians are on the brink of starvation. They are trapped and have nowhere to flee for safety. Neighborhoods, homes, and entire families have been destroyed. They need food, clean water, and medicine now. The suffering of Palestinians does not lessen or justify the suffering of those who were brutally attacked on October 7th. The trauma of the October 7th attacks on the citizens of Israel and Jews throughout the world cannot be minimized. There is no moral justification for the perpetrators, and they must be held accountable for the atrocities they committed. And while over 130 hostages remain captive, there will be no movement toward peace. They must be returned to their homes and loved ones. End quote. She never says clearly who is deliberately starving millions of Palestinians. She once again calls for Palestinians to be punished and held accountable, but she never says a word about holding Israel accountable. The best she manages is a both sidesy statement, which once again puts Israel first. And I'll just read a bit more of this. She says, quote, we don't need to be experts on Middle East politics to say what happened on October 7th was morally obscene. It is also morally obscene to inflict collective punishment on millions of people, and for the world to stand by as an entire nation starves. Faced with such a calamity, the biblical imperative, you shall not stand idly by, speaks to us all. Well, but, I mean, her only reference to the US government in any of this is this vague statement, quote, the United States government surely has the means to apply greater pressure to end this war so that the work of rebuilding, repair, and healing can begin. And she also says, I join with all those calling for a bilateral ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and the free flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. But again, she never once calls for Israeli or US leaders to be held accountable. Her criticisms of Israel are always indirect and mild. She never mentions that it is Joe Biden who is sending all the bombs to Israel, and never demands that he in particular stop supplying Israel with weapons. She never calls Israelis or Americans carrying out these atrocities evil, the word she used about Palestinians in her October 11th statement, and she never calls it a genocide. And at no time, as far as I can tell, has she ever even mentioned occupation or apartheid either. To me, it's just really, you know, I couldn't.
It's typical.
Yeah.
Typical liberal Zionist, pandering, and the resurgence of the so-called hashtag resistance. Right. This is what it looks like. People are done brunching, and now they're back to doing nothing, but claiming that they're part of something bigger.
I mean, I just couldn't let it go, because the genocide in Gaza is the Holocaust of our time. And I just cannot stand the sanctimony from people who are willing to show their supposed courage against Trump, but who remained silent. By their own admission, she says, I was silent.
Yeah, she's proud of it. Yeah.
She's proud of it. She tries to present her silence as a virtue in that statement. Silence during a Holocaust, which she actually justified by spreading atrocity propaganda and calling for retaliation, all while wringing her hands about innocent victims and praying for peace. And really, as you said, Nora, this type of comfortable, liberal, pro-Israel, both sidesiness, it does us no good. This is a time for people to have real courage, not just to talk about having courage. And one thing I do agree with Bishop Buddy on is when she said in her sermon in front of Trump, quote, may God grant us the strength and courage to honor the dignity of every human being, to speak the truth to one another in love. Well, I don't know how much love I have for her, but the truth is, she used her supposed moral authority to enable Israel's genocide, and I don't think people should get away with that, no matter how sweet their words sound on other topics. And I'm simply tired of this genocide-enabling liberal discourse that masquerades as empathy and love and peace.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear, Ali, from what you've just laid out there, that, in fact, she wasn't totally silent during the genocide. She was just silent in terms of not condemning Joe Biden or the Israelis, as she should have been doing. And perhaps if she had been genuinely silent, it would have been better than spreading Israel's atrocity propaganda. It's very interesting for me to watch that clip. That was the first time I'd actually seen it. And after, days now of people praising her, I'm surprised that's all she said. Like, it's kind of...
I mean, to be fair, she did.
Really.
She did say a bit more. There was a bit more. She talked about other people, but again, it was liberal platitudes. It was, be nice to all these minorities.
It just seems like she went running off to the New York Times afterwards, talking about how great and brave she was. To say something or something.
Well, they did it for her. I mean, all the all the liberal
true.
Media conglomerates were and I saw all over social media all these liberals who never said a word about Gaza, never said a word about Joe Biden's engineering of the Holocaust, are suddenly like, yes, wow, what courage this Episcopalian bishop has shown, and just kind of, it's nauseating. But I think my heart is too there's too much of like a concrete barrier around my heart now to even let it surprise me anymore. Just that's it.
She played it safe during the genocide, and now she gets to be treated as a hero.
That's right.
And there were people who lost their jobs, who lost their careers, who were smeared.
Yep.
I mean, nobody lost as much as people in Gaza because of Israel's genocide, but there were people who were willing to pay a price. Students were willing to pay more of a price than this big shot bishop. And I don't want to single her out as an individual, because I rather wanted to point to her as an example of a phenomenon that is universal in our Western societies, where we have all these sanctimonious people, from university presidents to clergy of all kinds, to all sorts of people claiming to be moral authorities, who stay silent and safe on this, but then pose as brave fighters on issues where it is a lot more safe to speak out, where at least half the country will be with you. All the people who didn't vote for Donald Trump will be with her. And I think there's another issue here, which is maybe a discussion for another day, and maybe one we should have, about the role of churches here, because the Episcopal Church, the Anglican Church, has a history of being involved in slavery. Its wealth came in large part from slavery, the Church of England and the Anglican Church globally, and it's not the only one. Other colonial churches have that history too. And the Anglican Church, for example, voted against sanctions against apartheid South Africa in 1988. They had to be dragged kicking and screaming into not just pontificating about apartheid, but actually doing something about it, putting their money where their mouth is. And it took them till everyone else had done it before the Church of England would actually divest from apartheid. And it's been the same with Palestine. They've dragged their heels. Finally, a few years ago, the Episcopal Church, after all the other, most of the other mainline churches, finally divested from Caterpillar, who makes the D9 bulldozers that John shows us being blown up week after week. But, these are relatively small symbolic measures. And I just think this is a time where, if all that stuff about never again and having courage in the face of tyranny and in the face of genocide, now's the time to put up or shut up.
We'll see where it all goes and who falls where. And, like the Hind Rajab Foundation, tracking the genociders wherever they go. I think that we do a similar job here, tracking people who have supported, egged on, or denied the Holocaust in Gaza. And so we will keep doing it. This is the duty, this is the task that we've assigned ourselves, and are very proud that we can do week after week after week.
Yeah. And I just want to say, because I know I was a little bit heated there, that this isn't, sort of an attack on people of faith in general, or I know from my own personal life and the work I've done in Palestine for years and years that our greatest allies and friends come from faith communities, the people who are out there fighting for Palestine, speaking truth to power every single day from every religious background, every religious community. And I truly respect that. I'm talking about this type of sort of institutional hypocrisy that I think we find everywhere.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Ali. Let's take a look at the website. We have a lot of features, by our contributors in Gaza and the West Bank, and by our staff editors. There's our colleague Dave Cronin's post up at the top there. Is Germany incapable of learning from its past? Always an important read from Dave, so please check that out. Also, we have some features by our writers in Gaza. I haven't even read through the new features. They're being published so quickly, but you can see there that's from, I can't even read, Reem Hamdona. Lucy the cat leads fight against food plundering mice. Really exceptional and creative and beautiful and important work coming from our contributors.
We've got a letter from one of Palestine Action's political prisoners as well inside. There it
Excellent.
is. Yeah. Inside a British jail. Francesca Nadine's second one. That's really worth reading.
Beautiful. Yeah. The work that is being done by Direct Action actionists around the world right now, trying to still shut this war machine down and bring the perpetrators to justice wherever they are is incredibly crucial. And so we're really proud to publish this letter. And of course, check out our blogs, our news posts, sign up for our email list, sign up for you can subscribe to this YouTube channel and on the other platforms. I put together an audio documentary that I'd been working on for a while, compiling 5 different interviews that I did with 𝐓𝐡𝐞, beginning from more than 10 years ago. So that was really important to me, this special project that I was really proud to put together. So that's on our YouTube as well as on all the podcast platforms. It's just audio. But it is it's really a special tribute, I think, to 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and all of his colleagues and family and students and people who are continuing his work these days. So thanks for checking that out.
It's really moving, Nora. Thank you
Thanks.
so much for putting that together. Really moving.
Thank you. And I just want to thank everyone, our audience, our listeners, our supporters. If you have a few bucks and are able to donate, we always take donations to keep this publication running and to keep our contributors in Gaza paid. So go to the Donate Now button at the top of the website, etc., or you can follow the links down here at the bottom of the YouTube. Tamara Nassar, thank you. Oh, yes?
One other thing, just to let people know, viewers who will remember that back when we did our special fundraiser show and question and answer show, and we had the prizes, we had sticker sets and books and other things. Those are going out. We just picked people randomly. We're sending them out. We didn't inform you. They're just going to show up. So if you're a lucky recipient, because we couldn't do, it's a lot of email to send. So we couldn't do it. So we're just sending them. So you may have
check your mailboxes.
I did get one. There was one. I did see one comment earlier in the stream of someone had received stickers in the post. So I forgot to say it.
Well, more on the way because I haven't sent out my cache of things yet.
So everything is going out now. It took us a little time, but it is going out. So
excellent. Thank you, Ali, for that update. Tamara Nassar, thank you for your production and direction of this episode and of the live stream in general and the podcast. Ellie Gerzon for all the social media. Thank you, Ellie. Maureen Claire Murphy, our senior editor, for all the pre-production and help with writing, of course. Michael Brown for fact-checking. Everyone at the Electronic Intifada, on behalf of all of us, near and far, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.